Hello, 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 hello. Welcome to the stream, everyone. If you can hear me, please let me know if you can hear or see or any of that. Also, I am very amused to see that Joseph Bugman limited ad availability. I don't think so. Request review. Anyway,
how interesting.
They're like, oh, Bugman.
But Bugman of all people, too much drinking, I say.
Yeah, too much alcohol.
Drinking. Hello, everyone. I'm really looking forward to this one. This is, as has already been posted all over the place, potentially the first in a new series of What Ifs. We will take a good look at some of the potential choices that the Warhammer world has made in the past and how they could potentially be taking down a very different path.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of fun discussions to be had today. We're going to be looking at a lot of the best way I can describe today, which makes it so exciting for me, is we're going to be looking at the threads and the bread trails that Games Workshop themselves were putting down and then didn't follow.
Yeah.
Like all the setup they did and then that Chekhov's gun just never fired.
Yeah, totally. This is a particularly interesting one because, as you will find out as we head in towards our introduction, this is a topic that we haven't just spun out of the air because we thought it would be cool. This is a topic that we've chosen because the army lists themselves very much suggest that this is a thing that could happen. Indeed, so much so that I have actually done this myself once in the past in one of my role-playing games. And in general, I would suggest that the what ifs, assuming we continue with them, are a really good way for GMs to have a think about the world building that the Warhammer world offers and what you could do potentially differently to the, let's say, slightly unsatisfying end that Games Workshop chose for their version of the Warhammer world. Because as we all know, my hammer, LAWhammer in this particular case, or your hammer, is always going to be different if you're playing the role-playing game, because as you start telling your stories, everything hikes off in a different direction. In many respects, every role-playing game is a what if. But in this particular case, we're going to be running down the what if of what the official canon version of the world could potentially offer.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of really, really exciting things to discuss for today. Obviously, we'll be doing the usual thing of if there's like super chats and all that stuff, we will get them in at, in little gaps as we go through. But we're going to be pulling a lot of y'all's comments as well, because as we're kind of going to be heading into some pretty hardcore theory crafting after we get our initial base set up. So, we'll build up a firm foundation, and then as we start to go up, we'll come to various points where we will very likely hit a, do you think this would happen, or should we go with this happened? And that will be good points to do like little polls and things like that. That way y'all are getting to be involved in this little discussion. But it's gonna be a good time. I'm very excited for this. This was kind of a, I don't remember who suggested it. I think it was no,
it was both of us. You because I suggested Lizardman, and then you suggested, what about this topic? And I was like, definitely this topic, because this is one that I've done before, so I'm really quite excited by where this one could go.
Yeah, there was someone in like one of the prior Lorebeards streams that was like, y'all should do a what if series, and I was like, eh. And then I thought about it for a few days and was like, we should do a what if series. All right, so I don't think there's anything else we really need to do other than maybe grab these like initial super chat stuff right at the start, but then I think we're good to head into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this week, unlike most of our normal Sunday Lorebeards, we should pass over to the good old Loremaster of Sotek for a nice introduction, because this is, after all, his playground. The Lizardmen themselves about to be invaded by all of our ideas. And again, just to double up on what Sotek said there, this is very much going to be a stream about your ideas as well. So please, if you've got ideas for how these things could progress or potentially go in a different direction, post them in the comments. Now, we can't get to all the comments, we fully admit that, but if you do super chat, we will definitely bring it up.
Yep, though Andy has to read this one first.
Hi all, first time commentator is us. Absolutely love the Sotek and LAWhammer streams. Just wanted to quickly say, got the chance to play Dark Deeds with 2 different friend groups over the break period. Marvelous. It's a fantastic game, and I have been doing my part to spread the word. Thank you both. First, Tormadar, thank you so much for not just playing the game, but playing the game with others as well and spreading the world, because the word needs to be spread, because we would love to sell many more copies of this so we actually can afford to make more games in future. So please, if you haven't done already, do pick up your own copy of Dark Deeds at modiphius.co.uk or modiphius.com, depending if you prefer to order from America or from the UK. I will say one more thing: if you've already done this, first, thanks so much. But if you do want to post reviews somewhere, like on sites or up on Amazon or something like that, it would be enormously appreciated. Again, thanks so much, Tormador. Brilliant.
Yep. We also, which by the way, there are links for those in the description if you're on YouTube, and perfect. Twitch will spam them every once in a while. Okay, getting these ones that came in before we started out of the way real quick, and then I'm going to hop into the intro. Laughing God, thank you for the super chat. So much of the various Warhammers are Chekhov's gun that has been fired. You're not wrong. Unfortunately, it's just the nature of the beast. But it lets us do cool things like this. So
it does.
It's not all bad.
I don't think you're at all. In fact, Laughing God, for all this is almost a tongue-in-cheek comment, and apologies if it wasn't meant that way. Kind of is, though. It's for people like us coming in afterwards a really good thing, because we can look at each of the army lists and go, well, take a look at what they were clearly hinting was about to occur. But it just doesn't happen, because instead of all the potential stories that we got, instead of, for example, Tamarkin's other brothers, all that we got was boom! The Warhammer world has blown up. But that does mean, though, that we have a ripe field of open opportunities for potential what-ifs in the future if everybody enjoys doing this.
Yep. Dumb-man, hey guys, Sotek mentioned on the map screen it's a bit odd that the Fortress Souls in the Chaos Waste, it should be within the realm of Chaos itself. Is that not also the case with the Marcher Fortress, as it's on the famous roads of Chaos? The way they, I mean, I could kind of see of them being like, well, we want to have these places represented. We don't want to show like the realm of Chaos itself. So it's like, I'm kind of like, about it. But yes, the Marcher Fortress is also supposed to be like in the realm of Chaos, not on like the edge. But I can just see them being like, we just kind of want these locations. I don't know, maybe they can pop out on the edge and pop back in. Who's, you know?
Hey, Downer man, be glad I wasn't in that stream.
Yeah, you would have had some things to say. I think I said that a couple times in the stream, seeing something being like, oh, that's a choice.
That's a choice. Yeah, there's for all, I absolutely love that they're finally getting to grips with building their own Warhammer world again, particularly for the old world. Many of the choices they've taken are just plain weird, and they seem to be made by people who either don't know about the areas that they're mapping or don't care about what has been previously created for those areas. And in some cases, that's good, because they are going in a different direction. But in other cases, you're just left going, well, that's a choice. Definitely a choice. They also definitely did something.
Not totally stealing fan-made maps and not crediting the people that made them.
From fan-made maps at all, which, you know, I imagine makes those particular people very happy indeed.
Yep. Rexo Gaming, what if the Sentinel of Shetty got a real ping? Hilarious, not quite the angle we're going to go, because that would be more of a old one returning scenario, which would be a very different thing. Maybe one day we can explore that as an option as well. Vault Boy 1300, can't wait for the inevitable Elf Pantheon stream. Oh yeah, we'll definitely do more Elf gods. I mean, we've done Kane so far. I think that's the only one we've done so far, but we'll definitely do more in the future. So let's get into this. To set the stage, I basically went through and read through all the Lizardman stuff, working my way from like the 5th edition up to the 8th edition and hitting a couple of little White Dwarf things as well, because I wanted to try and get as much stuff to paint pictures of things that are relevant to setting the stage of where we're starting. And for that, I'm also going to be using what I think is the best method to approach Warhammer, which is to try and incorporate as many different things as possible, even when they weren't necessarily used by Games Workshop in the end. So, for instance, I'm going to include the Albion Crisis in this discussion because it's really important and makes a lot of sense, even though it got abandoned later, though it's also coming back in like the newer stuff. So who knows? But anyway, Albion is Warhammer's is Schrodinger's island or crisis for the Warhammer world.
It's in crisis. No, it's not. Yes, it is.
So, the most important thing to start with is that the Slon. Everybody knows and loves our big fat toad boys that we have talked a lot about if you go back and check out our stream on the old ones. And you'll also note in our past stream on Tehenowin as well, those will be important things to go watch after this stream if you want to get some more context about things we're going to talk about today of how the Lizardmen have evolved as time goes on. One of the things that the 8th edition really dives into that I actually love, and I'll read a couple of little excerpts in a little bit, is that the Slon, when Chaos shows up to the world, the Slon and the Lizardmen fight against them, and the 8th edition goes very, very hard to say that in the aftermath of that battle, the Slon are not the same. They become far more lethargic. They become far more, their minds become foggy. And it's revealed that essentially a spell was essentially cast upon them to muddle their thoughts, which leads to them being very, very inactive. This builds up to the Slon not being a major force in the world until the rise. The first big thing that happens is the rise of Tehenowin, where Tehenowin comes up and he changes the Lizardmen. Once again, go check out our Tehenowin stream. But the Lizardmen fundamentally change after this point, where the non-Slon species, the Saurus and the Skinks and the Crocscores, become far more active and start doing a lot of their own things. But he does manage to get the Slon to gather up physically and have a debate with him. And the Slon are motivated enough by what Tehenowin represents that they go, you know what? This Sotek guy, he is equal to the old ones. He's just as important. They recognize this change, but still the Slon themselves haven't really changed yet. We fast forward another about 1966 years-ish, where we get the incident of El Cadavo. And this is a big deal, where there's this really hilarious guy named El Cadavo, who's so arrogant that he names every city he founds after himself, comes to Lustria, and he builds a city, starts invading the jungle, and it pisses off the Lizardmen enough that they go wake up Mazdamundi and say, hey, there's this guy getting too close, we need to do something. And they go, okay. And Mazdamundi wakes up and goes, fine, I'll deal with it. And he kills them. But then Cadavo escaped, and he comes back. And the Skinks go back to Mazdamundi and go, hey, this guy's back. And Mazdamundi goes, okay. And he gets up, and he squashes him again. And then El Cadavo escapes, and he comes back again for the third time. And at this point, Mazdamundi genuinely loses his shit. He's basically the equivalent of the really grumbly old man in the neighborhood. And there's kids playing baseball outside, and they keep hitting his window with balls. And it's the third time in the same day. He loses it. And he gets so mad that he fully wakes up and is like, put my palanquin on that stegadon, and I'm going to ride over there. I'm going to kill everybody. And he does. He goes over there and he just murders everybody. But he got so angry, so much, that very Sotek-like wrath really fired him up so much that it knows that he's never able to rest like he used to. He had essentially sort of thrown off the spell that was keeping him very befuddled and confused. Then we fast forward a bit more, and we get to essentially where I'm going to focus, though we'll talk about some other events later, but the big thing is the Albion crisis, where the Mists of Albion collapse. Be'lakor is revealed to be doing shenanigans and threatening the world. The Lizardmen, credit to themselves, notice and go, that's not good. And in about, I think like 2519-ish or something like that, they send an invasion force led by Kroq-Gar using the paths of the old ones. So Kroq-Gar and all of his buddies go into the path of the old ones, which is kind of like just walking into a particular hallway in the realm of chaos. They pop out in Albion, they kick ass, chew bubblegum, and Be'lakor's defeated, hooray. And the Lizardmen claim the interior of the island. They don't claim the whole island, but they claim the interior. And they build a new temple city for the first time in thousands of years called Conquata. And Mazdamundi uses his magic to start terraforming Albion into a jungle, which I'm sure won't have any terrible ramifications for the people that were already there. But then alarm bells start going off because in 2520, the mists are restored, but while Mazdamundi is distracted with some sacred plaques that are found on the Turtle Isles by Tinsladi, who is the Oracle of Lord Croak, Mazdamundi gets these sacred plaques that have never been seen before and goes, oh, these look like a really big deal. And he goes basically on a retreat so that he can just contemplate these in the most significantly resonant place possible to really enhance his thoughts, because the Slann are really good about going to specific locations to try and enhance their various abilities and contemplation and thoughts. And while Mazdamundi's away, Krokar's fighting in Albion, Hexwaddle gets attacked by a really, really nasty piece of work named Vashnar the Tormentor, who's this big, terrifying Slaanesh champion on a Chaos Dragon, whose goal is to kill a Slann so he can offer its heart to Slaanesh and hopefully ascend to demonhood. And he's also vaguely implied to be one of like the ever-chosen contenders, because Archaon's about to get the crown. And this all builds up to the Siege of Hexwaddle, which lasts for like 2 months. Mazdamundi and Krokar show up at the same time, coming back home. They kick the shit out of Vashnar, and then we get the big moment, which is that after defeating Vashnar and mopping the floor with the forces of chaos in 25-21, Mazdamundi, in the aftermath of the battle, psychically reaches out to all the Slann, and he gives a proclamation, which is that Mazdamundi says that he has finished deciphering these new sacred plaques that have been discovered from the Turtle Isles, and they have left him 100% sure that there is only one path forward, and that is that up until this point, they have failed the Great Plan. Because the first stage to get the Great Plan back on track is 2 main goals must be accomplished. The first is that all of the races that were not intended by the old ones and introduced by Chaos need to be exterminated. And the second is that all of the races created by the old ones need to essentially be restored to their spawning point.
Go home!
Yeah, all of the elves must go back to Ulthuan. All of humanity must go back to the old world, and all of the dwarfs must go back to the mountains. And you would imagine that presumably there would be things like the ogres need to go back to somewhere near where the maw is and things like that. But that is his big declaration. And he tells everybody, we're done playing defensive. We're done doing all this dawdling around. The time has come for action. All of the battles that have happened over the last 8,000 years will be mere skirmishes to what we're going to unleash now. It is time for us to strike. And then the end times happens, and the Lizardmen do absolutely nothing and wait for the Skaven to attack them and then die.
Oh, no, you didn't need to say that bit. It's a what if. The question is, what if the end times didn't occur in quite the way they did? Or perhaps they were even seen off by what Lord Mazdamundi decides to do instead.
Yeah, so now I would like to read 3 little quotes for you guys that I think will paint a very cool picture of what this would actually look like, this buildup. And these all functionally revolve around Mazdamundi and kind of do a good job of showcasing what the spell was that was affecting them and how this would occur. Because the big thing is that in order to have a Lizardman getting active and invade plot, you need to have, why would the Slann wait until now? Why not do it in the last 9,000 years? And here's your answer. So the first one, which the first 2 of these come from 8th edition. So the first one says, from his pool of tranquility atop the tallest pyramid of Hexwaddle, Lord Mazdamundi let his mind drift into the cosmos. In his becalmed state, the ancient Slann could still sense the entropic powers that encircled the world, including the dark tendrils that sought for him alone. After thousands of years of struggle, his consciousness was now unclouded by disorder. Through sheer force of will, Mazdamundi had shaken off the coils of discord that surrounded his mind and swept away the long malaise that sapped the energies of so many of his kind. At first, the greatest of living Slann had surmised that such effects were a byproduct of the influx of chaos. Though his focus had not, as of just yet, returned to perfect purity, Mazdamundi's thoughts were now unfettered, and he could once again perceive the message hidden in the stars. So this upcoming part I love a lot because it shows how he would be strategic about where to strike, because then it says, although he had overcome the enchantment cast upon his kind, Mazdamundi could still feel that all around him the world was still assailed by a storm of unreason. Countless skeins of fate were in play, but with his keen magical perception he could pick out which threads were being unnaturally manipulated and which moved of their own accord. Using the power of his prodigious thought, Lord Mazdamundi sought out the armies he had sent forth into the world. Each commander, from ancient old bloods to newly spawned skink chiefs, was directed to a battlefield. Some nearby, others to the far sides of the world. Everywhere, the foe must be met and defeated. Once again, the battle for dominion of the world was begun. So, cool, great, awesome. Also goes to show of that this what if is not actually that big of a what if. It's literally just following where they left us off.
Yeah, pretty much.
And then the last one, or the next quote, has to do with how the other Slan essentially woke up. And this one says, Lord Huashini was lost. Although his body floated calmly in the lotus-infused eternity chamber, his mind was entangled, trapped in a maze with no escape. For brief moments, the Slan Mage Priest's vision cleared, and he remembered he was seeking for something, although exactly what he sought was no longer clear. An overwhelming lethargy slowed his every effort, and even that he was looking for something was an ephemeral thought, a notion that hovered elusively just beyond his grasp. Once again, showing how this is why the Slan don't do a lot. I mean, they are fighting chaos and like strengthening the Great Warding and stuff using their spirit cells, but they're not really that active. But then we get the second paragraph where we get the oh shit moment. Through this dream haze, Lord Huashini heard a call from a distant voice within his mind, a faraway entreaty from Lord Mazdamundi. It was this message that recalled Lord Huashini, guiding him to cast off the spell that enthralled him. With a lurch, his bloated body startled awake for the first time in generations. In that instant, the Mage Priest was flooded with visions. He saw powerful enemy armies mustering, as well as the recovered messages of the old ones. Lord Huashini's eyes blazed with magical fury as he once more remembered his great purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So, the big things that we're starting off with, there will be a couple other fun things to talk about, but the big thing we're starting off with is Mazdamundi finally takes him 400 years, or more like 600 years. It takes him a while, but he finally figures out how to cast off the enchantment that's affecting all of the Slan, waking them up, and for the first time since the Cataclysm, bringing their full might to bear, which is a pretty big deal. One Slan being awake is usually fairly dramatic. All of them being awake is kind of fucking titanic.
Yeah, and I think it's something that the existing lore has never had. And by that I mean, what we have is the Lizardmen acting potentially at peak, with all of the Slan suddenly in a position where they can do what the Slan could do in ages past, and had been completely stymied from doing by the influence of chaos, whether you believe that was through spells or through what chaos was attempting to dampen them down. So what we have is a situation that is very much described already in the Warhammer books, and it's almost like they were about to do, but didn't, because the end times came, and in the end times version of events, the Lizardmen are exactly the same as they were before. Dreamy Slan, sort of trying to do what they're doing. The end is coming. The Skavens somehow can take them. It's all a bit weird. But the version that we have here is all of the Slan suddenly moving into a position of capability, awareness, and ultimately control and authority over them lies with Mazdamundi himself, the oldest of them, and let's be as blunt as we can be, arguably the most powerful magic user in the world, who is now combined with a bunch of other toad sorcerers who, in combination, and yes, they can combine their powers. It's discussed many times in the past. That's what they did during the Cataclysm many, many eons ago. They could combine their powers to enhance them even further. And these entities are now, in our version, awake. And they are ready to act according to Mazdamundi's will. And Mazdamundi's will is, I am taking control of the Great Plan. And the Great Plan says, down with all the things that weren't part of the plan, and everything that was should go back to its original starting point. And if you disagree with me, well, you're gonna die.
Yep. Hence his -10 diplomacy with everyone until the war. This is where I think we're gonna do our first little poll for y'all to decide of which of the three major goals that Mazdamundi would likely need to do right at the start you'd prefer to see first. So, as far as I see them, the big major goals that Mazdamundi would need to take after awakening the Slan, Lustrious, preparing for wars, he has three major goals right at the beginning, and we'll sort of explore each of these avenues. The first is reestablishing contact with the Southlands. That's going to be a major deal for him because that is the other major enclave of the Lizardmen that are still around. And for the record, depending on which version y'all vote for, I have more fun little stories for y'all about things that are going on in those parts of the world. The second option would be that he will immediately turn his attention to trying to get the younger races to return to some of their homes. So interacting with elves, humans, and dwarfs to try and get them back to where they are. And if they don't go along with it, then he's going to attack them. And the third being focusing on kickstarting the extermination of the undesired races, being your Skaven, your Beastmen, and all sorts of those kinds of creatures. So we're going to be doing some branching narratives here. I do have plans for all of these branching narratives, so it should be a lot of fun. And then while y'all are voting on this, that will give us the opportunity to get caught up with like super chats and stuff, as well as just kind of discuss some other random things that come up. So, Andy, I don't know if you would want to pull up the next super chat while I get the polls started, but we were on.
Well, while you're doing that, I shall quickly run back up here. What was the last one we had? Was it the Elf Pantheon stream?
Actually, we missed the Joe Miller one. I don't know how I missed that one, but
okay, then let's pull up Joe Miller. Oh, we'll both pull up Joe Miller at the same time. I definitely imagine Maz would push to unite and clear Lustria of Skaven first before any other planned shenanigans or planigans, if you will. I don't think that's a bad point at all. After all, you consolidate your base and then you move onwards. But we are in a position where we have Lord Mazdamundi in a slightly more supreme position, i.e. can communicate with the other Slan and can orchestrate plans not just in Lustria but across the world wherever the Lizardmen may be. So whilst I agree with this, I think in general, I think that the actual overall story is probably a bit bigger than just this alone. If we were looking at it in a very consolidated step by step plan, then absolutely. But we've got to think a little bit more 3D chess here. We've got to think a little bit more like the Slan. And the Slan don't just simply think of, I will take this process, I will do this, I will do this. They look at the bigger picture. And they look at how everything is connected. And through all of those somewhat more holistic view connections, they might realize that some things need to be taken first. Albion, for example. Or perhaps there's some lost Lizardman city that they need to get hold of first because there's a plaque there that they must gain access to. So you'll find that whilst I agree here, I think it may be a little bit broader. Anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, what I will add to that is that 8th edition actually has us covered on this one, which is that,
cool.
So I want to say it was in 2490-ish, so like relatively recently, only a couple decades ago, Teto Echo, the skink priest on the Palanquin from the city of Tlaxlan, got super famous. And the reason he got super famous is he was leading a Lizardman army, and Teto Echo is like beyond gifted at reading the stars and seeing the future and stuff like that. That's his whole gimmick. And he's this 100-year-old skink. He's this little old man skink that I love very, very dearly because he's adorable. And he led a Lizardman army near the city, the defiled city of Quetzal. And when he was over there, the Skaven attacked. And it would have been a massacre, but he kept seeing the future and redirecting his forces to block various tactics of the Skaven before the Skaven were effectively able to pull them off. So like they'd collapse part of the earth to create a tunnel, but the source would be there waiting for them. Or the warp lightning cannons were hidden off to the side, but then a bunch of cold ones slammed into them because Teto Echo sent them off that direction. But at the climax of the battle, a really rare event occurred, which is that the true moon eclipsed the chaos moon. So the chaos moon was completely blocked by the true moon, and Teto Echo saw everything for just a little bit. And the big thing that he saw that's revealed in the 8th edition text that I just want to read, because once again, this is big for discussing the kinds of things our Lizardmen will be doing and why they actually have potentially a better shot at this than a lot of people think, is here we go. So listen how interesting this is. gosh, here it is. Is it? Yep, here it is. So he wins like the initial battle. And it says, with the immediate threat stymied for the moment, Terueko closed his eyes and drew upon the winds of magic. Reaching out to the heavens, employing his prodigious will, the mighty skink priest pulled an unseen giant celestial object from out of orbit in the heavens above, bringing it crashing down upon the deserted city of Ketsa. With a thunderous impact, the comet fell to Earth, collapsing the tunnels underneath the city and stemming the endless tide of Skaven reinforcements. The remaining Ratmen, a cowardly lot, sprayed their musk and fled, only be cut down by the pursuing Saurus or preyed upon by the many hungry creatures awaiting them in the surrounding jungle. By his mighty deed, Terueko won the battle and steered the fate of the Lizardmen to victory when their defeat had seemed inevitable. However, the Astromancers scried the stars, and the message was unequivocal. The rat stars waxed strong. A vast network of tunnels was suddenly revealed to Terueko, far beneath the surface of the earth. It stretched across the world, and each passage was choked with malevolent vermin kind. Led by their loathsome god, they were coming to Lustria. Indeed, many of their agents were already in place. The Lizardmen must ready themselves for another war against the children of the Horned Rat. The thing that I really love about this is, for the first time, I think in the entire setting, outside of like crazy demons and stuff, we get a character that sees the Under Empire. Mm-hmm. He sees how big it is and goes, oh, that needs to be dealt with. Once again, the storyline didn't go anywhere, but he destroys the Undercity of Ketso by dropping a big comment on it. And this is actually one of the things I like about the Lustria book for 4th edition Wolfrup, is one of the big sections is about Ketsa and the Skaven trying to reclaim it, because it's just a horrible ruin. Because Terueko just basically dropped a nuke on it. So the Skaven presence in Lustria at this time is actually quite weak. In the end times, they end up just dumping out all of their forces from the Southlands to invade Lustria under Lord Skrolk. But there's actually not a great significant presence of Skaven there right now, because they're still reeling from that defeat.
Alrighty, so that's a good one. Moving over, Worthington Crescent, where do the gnomes fit into the Great Plan? They are a part of the Great Plan. Originally, there was 444 clans of gnomes made by the old ones, and each one of them had a purpose, something they were supposed to do. Come the last era, there's very few of these clans left remaining. For example, there's 8 of them left in Glimdwaro, and if we move to any of the other major gnome settlements across the old world, there's probably in total something in the region of around about 30 clans. All in all. So, are they part of the Great Plan? Yes. Do the gnome clans know this? Well, according to them, their gods gave them a purpose, something that they had to do effectively come the end times. And this purpose was handed down from mother to daughter, from mother to daughter, from mother to daughter, since time immemorial, because they have a matriarchal line that way, because you can never be certain of certain lines when you go down the male side. So, yes, is the answer to that.
Diamond, to be frank, as someone from real life Albion, being in crisis but kind of not is accurate to real life.
Yeah, well, yes.
I feel like there's a lot of that going around. Worthington Crescent, if Mazdamundi remembers the Great Plan in its entirety, is that total recall? It would. Yeah, sure. Yeah, he doesn't, but yeah, sure, you could call it that. Side of the Emperor, what if Bellacor's Archaon Gambit had succeeded, possessing 13th? Yeah, that'd be a good what if for a future stream as well. Yeah,
certainly would be a good what if.
10,000 ants. Which Slon would look the oiled up twerking? You know, I don't want to crash on your parade. I don't want to yuck your yum. So I'm not gonna go too far with that.
Okay, 10,000 ants, whatever makes you happy.
Donovan, so big potential question. Are we sticking with the lore that all the humans need to go to the old world? Or are we sticking with the lore that humanity had multiple spawn points, like the one in Cathay, the South? So the old world as a term is bigger than you probably think it is. But is this going to cause some potential conflict with Cathay? Yeah, I'd say this is going to cause Cathayan conflict. I think the humans in like the Southlands up to through Araby, up through like the Empire and Bretonian stuff, I think that's the Slum would be like, yeah, that's fine. But the Far East,
Yeah, I think we need to make a call on that. It's not just, is it fine? Is it not? I think that's fine. I think we make a call that humanity are an old world species because that's what they are described as in multiple sources. But the old world can easily be defined as Southlands up to the modern day old world. So all of that works fine. But that does mean that we will have a massive conflict with Cathay, Nippon, Koresh, and all the rest as areas where, according to this version, the people spread out after the cataclysm. Having said that, do note though that in the Cathayan history, there was humans in that area pretty much from the cataclysm.
Yep. Because the big thing you have to remember is that Mazdamundi, while knowing a lot, he's not omnipotent. So there could be that there were old ones that did things that he doesn't know about, which means he's not going to act on that knowledge, which can cause some fun spice. Would Mazda find jorts to be in the Great Plan? No. Salon wearing jorts is a sin. No pants. Just they're fine. Rexo Gaming, wouldn't Lord Croak intervene if Mazdamundi was wrong? That's a great question. The answer is probably not. Lord Croak doesn't really get involved until the only time we ever see him get involved is when its shit has gone so far beyond the point of salvation that he's like, okay, time to basically get set up for AOS. Here I come. So I think we would probably use him in a similar context here. We're like, sure, his body might be wheeled out and be on battlefields blasting people, but ultimately, I don't think he would personally get involved in the way that you're kind of suggesting, unless things got so dire that he initiates the next stage that he seemed to know about.
Yeah, Lord Croak is very much his own entity. Now, there's lots of different ways that you can imagine him if you wish to do so. You could, for example, imagine him being an entity that is almost outside of time. And by that, I mean, it doesn't matter that his physical body is dead because his mind is still working in the aether from the era from whence he came. And he is absolutely someone who has access to parts of the Great Plan that no one else does. So in this particular model, we're going to assume that Lord Mazdamundi is moving ahead, and what he is doing is ultimately not something that Croak tries to stop. But that doesn't mean that, should we come to a conclusion, that Croak won't intervene during that conclusion because it's time to move on to the next part of the story, whatever that next part may be come the end of this.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting that Tinslotty, who is the skink oracle that discovered the plaques that led Mazdamundi to this conclusion, is Lord Croak's oracle. He was guided by Lord Croak. Croak is the one that discovered these plaques and gave them to the rest of the salon.
And it's also worth noting that Mazdamundi himself is a disciple of Lord Croak, so it's not exactly like he's not someone who is very intimately aware of Croak's general, let's say, direction. He pretty much sat underneath Croak going, hey, Croak, what's next? Croak said, do this, do this, do this. They're very much going to be working in simpatico, so it's not something I would be deeply worried about in this instance.
Psych, let's get this apocalypse canceled. Oh, man.
Damn straight, psych.
Yeah, if only you knew what you'll get in exchange, but okay.
Oh.
Wouldn't Mazda get rid of Sotek first? No. The Slaawn are very in favor of Sotek. They literally had almost what's that famous like religious council called? The Nemean Council or the
Council of Nicaea, yeah,
something like that.
Nicaea.
They had their big get together to decide if Sotek was good or bad, and to anyone convince them he's good. Yeah. He is part of the plan.
And the version that we're going with here is very much that the old toad faces sat back, saw the rise of Sotek, went, this might not be a bad idea. And the rise of Sotek has changed the lizardman species, but in a fashion that has allowed the Slann themselves to rise out of the fog that they're currently captured by. So in some respects, it's the rise of Sotek and the rise of the lizardmen as a different type of species in comparison to what they were back with the old ones that has allowed them to reach this point. So Sotek is not a negative in this particular instance, very much a part of the Great Plan according to the direction we're going in here.
Yeah, because Sotek, I mean, he is literally the entity that embodies striking against chaos, like being offensive, which is something Lizardmen don't often do. Andres, in my opinion, it's ridiculous that he wants to fuck up the dwarves and humans almost as much as Chaos. They're the main bad guy. Why is he still like that? So don't misinterpret like him being like, I'm going to go down there and kick their ass. It's Mazdamundi trying to. I mean, granted, he may well do that, but yeah. This is Mazdamundi looking at basically. Imagine you're following a set of instructions where you're trying to assemble something very difficult. And you're looking down and realizing that all of the screws and bolts are in the completely wrong places. And you go, oh, well, that's not going to work. Like, I can't even think about finishing this piece until I get the basic components right in the back spot. And he's trying to get things back in the correct spot. He's not looking at it as I'm going to go fight with these guys. He's looking at this going, I need to correct their behavior. And if I need to use force to do it, then so be it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is... I find your comment really quite interesting because ridiculous that they would fuck up the dwarves and the humans. And from the lizardman perspective, okay, they don't care. There is no fucking up here. The lizardmen are cool and they are calculating, and the humans and the dwarves are not in the place where they should be, which means that they should be moved. Same with the elves. Fuck the dark elves. Fuck the Lorelorn. Fuck Athelloren. None of that matters. The elves should be in Ulthuan, because the great manual that I have here from IKEA says quite clearly that when I'm screwing in part A to part B, it needs these screws in these places. And currently they're all over the place. And worse, because we have other species and other craziness involved, there's all manner of other parts that we don't need. I don't need myself a gigantic jackhammer, which is apparently strewn across my lovely piece of IKEA furniture. So we're going to throw that jackhammer away, put that in the bin, even though everyone loves a gigantic jackhammer, and we're going to stick with this very small little twisty-turny screw thing, which is used to put those humans back where they should be. So loosely speaking, I think this is a beautiful analogy presented by Sotek here, which is that he's going back to the instructions of his IKEA furniture for the Warhammer world. And if you don't like that, fuck you. I am going to murderalize the lot of you to clear out that area to ensure what should be in that place now is in that place, because that's the only way we can be certain that we're returning to the great plan.
Yeah, think of it this way. Mazdamundi goes, I don't need a... Fuck your power drill. They provided me with an Allen wrench, and I'm going to use it. That's all 2021. Saw the Corn Brothers stream the other day. Would have been interesting to see all the new units and lore, not just for Corn, but also Tomb Kings and Lizardmen, Croxagors with hand cannons and pirate hats. Sure, why not? Sure. At this point, yeah, we were truly in lands of creation at that point. Why not? Ricky Chapman, the dog would be sort of happy at first with a bunch of allies showing up saying that they want to help kill the Skaven and get their back their ancient home. So that's something we'll talk about in a little bit. That I think y'all may be surprised how, and we'll discuss it when we talk about talking to the younger races. There are some interesting threads that I think some races might not respond how y'all may initially think they would.
Yeah. This should be fun.
Yeah. Chapter Grim, a surgical strike won against Skaven Blight ASAP with as much magical might as they could muster. The elves, gnomes, Southland, lizardmen, etc. The Skaven represent the single biggest threat to the strategizing. I mean,
do they?
Yeah.
They're big, but
yeah. There's a funny thing to be said about the Skaven, and this is something the lizardmen actually do if you go read the Thankful trilogy, which is that the Slann have a rather amusing and profound understanding of the truth of the Skaven, which is that the Skaven's worst enemy is other Skaven. And if you try to attack them too early with too much of a sudden push, the Skaven will unite and make an actually terrifying, near unstoppable force. There's kind of you have to take a unique approach to the Skaven when it comes to dealing with them, because if you come on too strong, to put it very bluntly, you're going to lose. I think an Alpha Strike against Skaven Blight would actually be the wrong choice. But we'll talk about that more when we get into like the extermination discussion.
And how they deal with each thing. Yeah, indeed. Yeah. I have opinions.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. Solter, would the Lizardmen help the Dawi retake all the fallen holds? I see zero argument happening from them retake the realm. We'll get into this in a bit, but I'm going to say Dino Man, are dragons part of the Great Plan? They weren't made by them, but they weren't killed by the Saurus. Now, whether they'll just left alone or the genocide was unsuccessful is unknown as far as I'm aware. So we will we'll discuss that when we get into the younger races.
Yeah, we're going to have to discuss how each of the different factions of the Warhammer world are dealt with, and that is absolutely going to include dragons, because dragons clearly had a place in the Great Plan, because take a look at, for example, where the dragons ended up with Ulthuan. Take a look at how, even when we're talking before the Cataclysm, the dragons were at least a core component of the peace that was eventually arrived at after they basically genocided the world. So there's discussions to be had here, but are they part of the Great Plan according to Mazdamundi? Now that is a question.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that. Necromancer Kobold. What I think is fascinating about the concept about a what if series discussing how much worse than chaos can X faction be for other factions. Yeah, I think that'll be the big thing, is showing the awesomeness of all the factions while also showing kind of in many ways the worst aspect of all the factions, because in the classic story of like Athel Loren, it may be possible to defeat chaos, but what you may have to become to do so may be worse, or at least just as bad.
Yeah, and it's worth noting here as well that if you are looking for the great big bad of the world, it is chaos in this particular what if. What chaos is going to be the hardest part of it all by some enormous stretch. Having to deal with, say, for example, everything that Cathay represents is going to be small beans in comparison to what effectively amounts to closing the Chaos Gates and banishing the 4 great gods of chaos. Good luck with that.
Yep. Hendrik, Mazdamundi, assuming direct control. Yeah.
Too much Mass Effect going on. Damn straight.
Yeah, Mazdamundi is sitting up in his gamer chair. It's true.
He is.
Luigi Super, why did that one slung kill the Prophet of Sotek? Oh, so from the Thankwell series, the best way I could just... So that happens in a bit of a... so that entity, this like other... It's not Tehennowin, but it's a Tehennowin adjacent character. Because back then they had the thing that Tehennowin died of old age, but there would be like a new prophet that would rise up every once in a while, and then he later got changed to be immortal. But that doesn't necessarily mean he's the only one as well. But essentially, he doesn't directly kill him. It's more that the Slann observes a series of events, and when a human takes the choice to try and kill the Prophet of Sotek, the Slann basically takes these kind of loose threads of destiny and he pulls them tight. And when he does that, that human's choice has consequences. The consequence being that it kills the Prophet of Sotek. Now, why exactly the Slann decided to reinforce that is kept deliberately rather vague, but it's basically the Slann seeing a series of choices that destiny will follow, and when he sees which one is about to happen, he reinforces the decision that human character makes, which is super interesting. But that's kind of a more of a chat, I think, for a future time about, like, we'll have to do a stream at some point about the nature of destiny in Warhammer, because it is very interesting. The Pygmies' role in the Great Plan is to strongly pretend not to exist and be hurriedly shooed out of sight when anyone mentions them. Yeah,
you're not wrong.
Unfortunately, yes. Korinshima, why Kroak is built different? Why is there no other first generation lingering around after death? There is. They're just not talked about. The relic priests are an established concept. Kroak is not the only one. He's just the first.
Yep. He's the special character. It'd be a little bit like looking at the Empire, for example, and going, hey, we've got some Electrocounts here. That's all the Electrocounts. No, it's not. We've got other ones who are mentioned in a variety of places. It's just they've not been given their special characters or stats or models or an equivalent. And underneath those, there's thousands of dukes and counts and all the rest. Similarly, there's a whole host of characters that the Lizardmen have at their fingertips, but just aren't detailed by the game.
Jack Ruby, close the door on the gate, step 1. No.
I mean, closing the gate is a core component of bringing the plan back into, well, the Great Plan.
I think trying to do that at the
step
start.
1? Wow.
Yeah, that's probably step last, because if you do it that, they're going to need some help. Sign of the Emperor, who would be the most difficult for the Lizardmen to deal with? I feel like Chaos Dwarves, Ogres, Cathay. We'll talk about that when we get into like the extermination and stuff like that.
It's going to get grim, by the way.
It is.
It's going to get grim.
I know you may get to it, but will Mazdamundi still try and destroy the Great Maw / the Galleon's graveyard? I I think he
Yes.
probably. I think he would try and unbind it. Yeah, which would
it
be.
has to be undone.
Yeah, which is going to get interesting. But we'll get into that. Address theory's fine, but how can he not see that he doesn't have the manpower and should think practically by the time? So we'll talk about this because the situation's more complicated than it appears at first.
And the doesn't have the manpower may not be true.
Entirely true, yeah.
Yeah, what we've got to realize is that we are not dealing with the broken, fractured, uncertain lizardmen that we have in the army list. We have moved past that to the what if position, which is all of the Slann have been lifted out of their dream. They are all working in concert. All of the Lizardman cities can now act as they should, and most importantly, they have absolute and direct control of the past of the old ones, which will be very quickly consolidated, meaning that no matter where you are in the world, they can drop hundreds of thousands of Lizardmen. There is no wall that can save you. There is no portal that you can hide behind. They can be anywhere. It is frankly terrifying from the perspective of what it represents. And there is only really two forces in the entirety of the Warhammer world that are prepared to deal with that. One is chaos, because they've done it before. The old demons have faced this back in the Cataclysm, because the Lizardmen could do it back then. And of all, Cathay. Because Cathay have also dealt with this back when they were going through the first genocide. Now, the dragons are the ones who know how to deal with it, not the Cathayans themselves, but they can quickly pass on, this is how we hold off. But no one else is prepared for just how powerful the Lizardmen can be when they act. And the big thing is that in the Warhammer world as we have it already, they didn't. What they did was they got crushed by Skaven and then ran away using all of their great paths instead of staying and pissed off to Age of Sigmar. So in this particular instance, I think you might be surprised at just how capable they can be.
Yeah, because one of the things we'll be talking about this stream as well is A, how strong the Slann actually are, and B, what kind of weapons they have that they don't just use. Because in this scenario, and like the fulfillment of certain prophecies that were once again laid down. Baron von Besser, then he's on there active as Mazdamundi. As active? No, not even close. He is the most active. There are some that are getting close to his level, and in this scenario, they're all going to be close to his level.
Oh, yeah.
But none are as active as him. Lord Mazdamundi burned them all. Skinks, dragon, confetti. But Ricky Chapman and Sloan looks at Ulthuan. You broke my donut! I'm like looking at Ulthuan for the first time. I could have sworn that place was bigger last time I looked at it. Chapter Grim, curious how the Nomai clans fit in the plan. They do fit in it.
So how the Nomai fits in is very much up to individual interpretation. I left it when I wrote that particular sections purposefully vague so that it could be picked up by later writers and taken in whatever direction they preferred.
Okay. So I'm going to leave us off there so that we can go ahead and go into y'all's first vote, and then we'll check back with super chats at the next kind of pause. So
sounds good.
Everyone on both chats voted overwhelmingly for reestablished contact with the Southlands is Mazdamundi's first objective. Now, I think this is the correct decision because this is more about building up the Lizardman power base, and we're going to introduce a concept that when you hear it, you're going to go, that's bullshit. And I'm going to go, yeah.
I'm going to be dropping all manner of bullshit too. I'm looking forward to this immensely.
Yeah, so this would actually be overall a relatively simple thing. The most likely route that Mazdamundi, in my opinion, would need to take based on lore we have to reestablish the connection with the Southlands would, which may sound crazy, but for Mazdamundi, it's actually not that hard, would be raising Chup Yodel from the deeps. Chup Yodel was the connection point between Lustria and the Southlands. And when it fell off a continental shelf, totally not due to Fishman ritual magics, go watch our Fishman Lorebeards stream from a year or so back. Chup Yodel sank to the bottom of a big trench, and because of that, it severed the warding between, or the geomantic web between the Southlands and Lustria, which not only weakened both of them, but cut off communication. So Mazdamundi, you may go, well, that sounds really hard. For Mazdamundi, when he wants to, no. He raised an entire mountain range that is colossal, known as the Great Guardians, horrifically fast. And not only is it a big scary mountain range, it's also sentient, which don't ask me how that works. It's terrifying.
Yeah, Mazdamundi is quite clearly marked. I mean, even in his various iterations in the Warhammer game, is having spells that can literally bring down cities. That is what Mazdamundi is. And this version of Mazdamundi basically draws in the Slan of Lustria and in concert with them rises up Chapyotl, and then from there bridges outwards towards all of the other Lizardman cities across the world. And I'm also going to suggest that at this point that we say that the establishing contact with the Southlands is potentially also establishing contact with Ind, establishing contact with Koresh, because the Lizardmen were a global force. And just because the army lists have never really detailed what lies beyond, that doesn't mean nothing lies there. I would suggest that one of the primary reasons they didn't detail it is because they didn't know, as in Games Workshop, what they're going to do with it. But we're in what-if territory. We can say what's most likely. And what is most likely? There are ancient cities in Ind. There are ancient cities in Koresh. And possibly even in Lumbria. Choke, it's just Lustria. Where basically all the cities around the world get reconnected back together into the old geomantic web, with Mazdamundi at the top communing with all of the Slan across the world, bringing back the great centers of power that the Lizardmen once had.
Now, because chat in our little turn to page X when you decide on what decision you want to make, y'all chose reestablish contact. There are two characters who are going to play a really key role in what just happened. The first, to go with what Andy said, is Oxiodal. So the Chameleon Skink Oxiodal traveled across the world and basically took like a 10,000 year walk where he spent a lot of it in the realm of chaos, but he physically walked out of the realm of chaos and walked home to Lustria. But he took a really weird route, because we know he went one super important place, which is that Oxiodal went to the lost city of the Old Ones in Koresh, a ancient, beyond sacred place that was believed completely lost and is said to be like the empty hallways of the gods themselves. But Oxiodal found it. And now, in our what if, he leads the Lizardmen back there. So the Lizardmen return to the lost city of the Old Ones. They return to the Southlands, reestablishing connections, making contact with Slatland, which is still standing. So now the Lizardmen forces have strengthened considerably. They've reestablished contact with what's left of the Dragon Isles, but there's potential for the Slan to be able to start re-establishing those Lizardmen properly and bringing them back under control. And like Andy said, some other pockets as well in the various jungles of the world. And there's one other character who now gets involved who's going to introduce a concept that's going to blow your fucking mind. And that's Tichi-Huichi. So Tichi-Huichi is a fairly old character from White Dwarf 232, I think. And he is this cute little badass skink that rides. He's a great crested skink, which is a cool old-fashioned way of just saying skinks with really lovely crests, who leads an army of Horned One riders. And he was from the Regiments of Renown. And you may go, okay, well, what does this matter? Well, that's because of how Tichi-Huichi works. So Tichi-Huichi's lore specifically states that he is a very, very successful mercenary in the old world. He's a skink that rides on Horned One with a bunch of other skinks that ride on Horned Ones, and they're kick-ass mercenaries. But they cannot speak anyone else's languages. They don't speak human, elf, Reichspiel, Kozilid, any of those other languages. The way they work is that they show up on a battlefield, and they meet someone, and that person has had strange dreams of late. Yeah. And it feels so compelled to not attack these strange reptilian creatures, but to communicate with them non-verbally and offer them treasures until he goes, oh, I want this one. And they go, oh, okay, you can have this one. And it turns out that it's a lost treasure of the Old Ones. And so they work for that guy for a while. And then while they're defeating some other enemy, they will suddenly stop. And that enemy will go, I had a strange dream about this. And it's revealed in Tichi-Huichi's story that there is a Slan somewhere in Zlatland who's not named, but there is some likely second-generation Slan who is psychically influencing people in the old world who have Old One treasures and appearing and manipulating their minds, likely using some scary fucking Olgu magic, to basically work with Teach Uichi and hire him on, and then when he eventually moves on and leaves them, not to like try and pursue him or kill him or anything. And to put into perspective how insanely scary this is, it's not just like, oh, they're just like influenced, but in a really weird way that someone would find suspicious. There's mention of there's a great dwarf lord of so King Grundedrak of Barakvar has a dream where his ancestors come to him. And his ancestors speak to him and tell him that he needs to hire this skink because it will result in great victories and the return of some relics and treasures. So there's a goblin shaman that has a vivid dream of Gork and Mork talking to him, telling him, you gotta hire this skink, you gotta get these little green reptiles with us. And he hires the skinks. The skinks canonically work for a Tomb King who is stirred to consciousness from his eternal rest by strange dreams. The goblin shaman, the king of Barakvar, and also some Arabians and also some humans. So like they get around, and it's this Slann just mind manipulating people, saying you should do what I tell you, but in a way that's culturally relevant to them, which is terrifying. That is so strong.
Yeah, and this is, I think, how we're going to be tackling many of the how do the other factions cope when the great Mazdamundi plan is forced upon them. And the answer is, for some of them, they don't have a great deal of choice because their own gods tell them to do it. But for others, they're going to react very differently. But we'll get there when we move through each of these factions and discuss them. But in terms of the expansion outwards, we are dealing with, in this particular instance, peak lizardmen, and we're assuming that they are working together in a fashion that they simply generally don't do inside the Warhammer books. We're not looking at the Warhammer books and saying this is what they are. We're looking at the Warhammer books and saying what do the books suggest they could be, and we are taking those and saying the lizardmen have access to, once they network together, not just an enormous chunk of lizardmen across the world, but also, as they connect through to the Southlands and the other cities elsewhere, access to the ancient weapons of mass destruction that the planet used to be defended by, and they use to go to war with the world. So we are looking at a species that, as we have discussed more than once in our End Times discussion, should have had a massive impact in the End Times, but didn't. But in this What If, they absolutely will. And they are in a position where they can very much get what they want until they hit someone that says no.
Yeah. So, thanks to y'all's choice, we now have a Lizardman empire that stretches from Lustria to the Southlands to the Dragon Isles up to Albion on the Isle of Conquata, or the Temple City of Conquata, which is now a forward base into the Old World and into the Lost City of the Old Ones, which means we're going to have more Old One tech. Reinforcing the Lizardman Legion. So y'all have picked a very strong initial path. So
I'm going to add one other little thing before we start moving into our super chats, and that's also that this is enormous in terms of what is being done. We're making that quite clear. They're rising cities from depths. They are bringing back to life arcane technologies and magics that have been lost for 10,000 years. This is not small beans, but it's also not what you might necessarily think in terms of time. Because the time aspect of this, and the Slann are moving quickly, have two big changes that you might not immediately notice. Number one, they can move swiftly. For all the big toads tend not to, they can. So it may be a matter of weeks to months to do this, but they also have one other massive advantage, and that's that each and every last one of the Slann are masters of the winds of magic. And they work in concert. Time can move at a different rate. This is why, for example, Athel Loren often has issues with time. You go in there, get lost for 100 years, come out the other side, you're still 20, but hundreds of years have passed. Alternatively, you might go in and come out and almost no time has passed. How can that work? The winds of magic change the material realm. And if you're a master of all 8 winds of magic and high magic like the Slann are, they can literally drop the city that they're raising from the waters underneath an enormous bubble of amethyst magic and cause time itself to run like liquid, slow nothing. And inside there, everything moves at a normal rate. But from the outside, it's like they're moving so much faster. The lizardmen are frankly scary, and this is something the colleges of magic can do already, but they do it in tiny little bubbles. So for example, the Amethyst College might have a tiny little bubble where there's a bunch of people who study in there for their next exam, and they're in there for only an hour, but they get 4 days of study done. Think of that, but on the epic scale of the Slan, with Lord Mazdamundi controlling it, allowing, for example, once we've got everybody together, the spawning pools to produce at speed.
Yeah, that's the other thing that makes the lizardmen so scary when you really break it down, is that with this what if, the old ones would have foreseen this. Sotek, there's going to be countless sacrifices being made to Sotek as Tehinuin is firing up the skinks, firing up the lizardmen. They're making sacrifices. There's going to be spawnings coming out at horrific rates because the lizardmen don't have to have children. They don't have to train their soldiers. They come out ready to go. They're one of the scariest fucking things as far as a legion goes, because they don't, a lot of the logistics that go into a mass mobilization, the lizardmen just totally ignore. They don't have to worry about like baggage trains because they can use the paths of the old ones, or in some stories, like the destruction of Slagmire or in that Storm of Chaos incident, they can just teleport. Like Tehinuin and an entire army of lizardmen are just teleported to the Skaven city of Slagmire to destroy it over the course of a 3-year war. That's Slagmire's in the middle of like the fucking Grey Mountains, like, or the Black Mountains or something. But like they just get ported there through a magical portal. Which is,
I'm loving the fact that we started with gigantic empire. Let's go.
yeah. So the next poll is up. Of what do y'all think? So Mazdamundi is established. He has reached out. He's now has these additional forces to aid him. He's now retaking the abandoned cities that have been left to sit for a long time, because lizardmen do retake cities, but they tend to do it very, very slowly. In the case, like we see Huatl the Awakened, which is a city that they start retaking. So now the question is, do you think Mazdamundi should focus on trying to talk to one of the younger races, or do you think he should turn his attention to exterminating? Should he maybe go after the Vampire Coast? Or should he try and talk to the elves? Or should he try and wipe out the Skaven? Or should he try and talk to the dwarves? So, like I said, this is kind of a choose-your-own-adventure book with me and Andy just providing you all lots of fun details as we go. But the next vote is up, so let's go ahead and start doing some more Super Chats here.
Indeed, there's quite a few, so we'll need to move swiftly.
Yes. Rexo Gaming, basically, this is what if Zinchen oopsie and forgot to upkeep his spells? Yeah, you're not wrong,
yes.
but hey.
In fact, Rexo, I completely agree. This is the what if the lizardmen slip free of the horror that Chaos planned. And the answer is possibly very bad for Chaos, depending upon how this unfolds.
Yeah, Zinch doing the equivalent of like the Jurassic Park, make sure the power lines don't go down, and he fell asleep and wakes up and all the power's off. He's like,
there's dinosaurs everywhere. Ah, crap.
Meat Pizza, what would Mazdamundi do with the Chaos Dwarfs? He would destroy them. He would absolutely, he would look at them for 1 second and go, nope. Like, those are rotten.
Yeah, these are something that the Chaos Dwarves are most certainly going to be on the receiving end of his ire.
Yeah, which is going to get ugly. Because the Chaos Dwarves are very capable of defending themselves. Man, this seems like a great potential in-game crisis. For Total War? Yes, it absolutely should be. Psych, not a Mazda direct question, but are the Slan made to use Hish single-handedly by croaking? Not a joke, they just sounds like something a toad can do. The Slan actually have some really cool ways of using magic that's talked about in various stories, where it sounds like they're in a almost comical sense, they usually describe it as like burping or belching,
but
it's them croaking like frogs, which frogs sing. Which
I can see Paul McCartney from the 80s with the frog chorus right now. It's just like that. Burp, 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 la la la, burp, la la la.
Meanwhile, there's like fire raining from the sky and the earth opening up.
La 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 la. I've got this urge to go watch that ancient video now.
Wonder Alpha, what would Mazdamundi do when the Dragon Emperor pulls out the gold plaque that says Cathay is part of the plan? I've got the contract right here, officer.
We're going to have to decide exactly how we deal with Cathay, because Cathay is going to be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun dilemma for y'all when we get to Cathay. That would be a forking path for y'all. Is we're gonna, I think, propose a couple of options of how that could go down. Ricardo Ande, Mazdamundi forcing Malekith, the Twilight Twins, and Alariel to the same dinner would be really funny / weird. Also, what if Alisara didn't vanish after Sori's death? That would be an awesome what if. I'm writing that down. What if Malekith's wife didn't leave him?
Hey, Ricardo,
like
that one.
Yeah.
Oh boy, is that a good one. Malekith will be in a very different place.
Yeah, that's fucking cool. I'm writing that one down. I'm actually gonna do it right now on my list here.
Well, why are you doing that? Honestly, in terms of game versus lore inconsistent power scaling, Slans seem as close to fantasy as to like named Space Marines in 40k. I would argue that the Slan are much more than named Space Marines in 40k. Way more.
Yeah, I think what you meant to say is the closest thing to actual old ones in 40k.
Yeah, the Slan are, in terms of their potential power when they're working peak, they are peak Warhammer. There is very little that can go toe to toe with them. In fact, I'm going to change that slightly. There is nothing that can go toe to toe with them. There is individuals who can go toe to toe with, say, Mazdamundi. Definitely, lots of them. But if they're working in concert, our Great Frog Chorus, if our Great Frog Chorus is going on, the world is in trouble. So the world is going to have to do something to try and stop it.
To put this in perspective from like a 40k thing, so you know, like the Eye of Terror, and when it opened, it just like obliterated planets and sucked everybody in and stuff. The Slan are they're so goofy powerful that when the reality chaos ripped open, the two polar gates collapsed, and chaos, basically the Eye of Terror on steroids, right? Ground zero, they're right next to it. The Slan working together were able to stabilize everything. They were able to put all the planets back in their orbits, prevent the realm of chaos from like going out and eating the solar system and from destroying the planet. They wrapped it in place around the planet and prevented the planet from being destroyed all within an instant. And now half of them died because of it, but because the effort was so extreme. But like, just imagine the Eye of Terror happening to like the Elder or whatever, and one planet being like, no, like we're gonna make this a very contained incident.
Yeah, the Slan are proper bullshit. In terms of their overall power, they are extraordinary, which is one of the reasons why the Warhammer version of them that you get in 6th, 7th, 8th edition, they're pretty stymied. They're rubbish by comparison to what they used to be. They're all living in a dream. They're caught up with what the Chaos Gods have done to it. Now, they are utterly untouched by chaos. They are incorruptible as entities, arguably the only incorruptible entities on the Warhammer world. But that doesn't mean that chaos can't do things to try and stop them from being able to utilize their power, because they saw just how powerful they could be when the cataclysm first occurred. And in this version, we've got Mazdamundi waking up and all the rest of them doing something similar, largely because of the influence of Sotek.
Yeah, Dinkmatter, what's the probability of Zotes being a splintered species of lizardmen? Thanks for making my mundane afternoon significantly less stultifying. I'd say probably a pretty decent, good 50-50 shot.
I'd probably say no, because they are six-limbed, unlike most of the lizardman species. They've got a different grounding. They've got the same grounding as, say, dragons. Dragons have also got 6 limbs, the 4 they use plus their 2 wings. So I would suggest that Zotes probably either predate or alternatively are external. If you go with the wider Games Workshop lore, you could even claim that they are a proof that Tyranids have made contact with the Warhammer world.
Yeah, there is a note in when they got updated in the Storm of Magic that the Zotes have a relationship with the old ones, and that they were the original like gardeners of Athel Loren back when it was planted, and that the Slan know them. Like the Zotes and the Slan know each other, but we don't know what their relationship is, and we don't know how they're related. It makes a cheeky comment that the Slan don't respond to queries on the subject, which is a
I would
sentence.
suggest that they are just a species like any other in the Warhammer world that has been elevated and used by the old ones.
I would agree.
That makes it nice and simple. And they have a place to be, which is tending the great spiritual forest, which the elves should fuck out of. Get the hell out. It's not your job. Okay, the wood elves are a perversion of what they should be. The elves at best should be doing that job over in Avalon.
When you leave behind your awesome ripped 6-limbed lizard guys to tend the forest, and you come and there's a bunch of Twinkie elves, and you go, whoa, what's
what happened here?
Chapter Grim, the old world, a la Eurasian supercontinent, IRL, so Grand Cathay would fall. So the Grand Cathay traditionally does not fall within the scope of what we call the old world, and I think for this, that's why when we talk about Cathay, we're going to talk about branching paths. So y'all will get to help us decide how Mazdamundi is going to feel about it.
Yeah,
it is
indeed, because you generally find that in Warhammer, the spine of the world's edge mountains, is the dividing point. So on one side, you have humanity, and on the other side, you have things like halflings and ogres. They are the ones that were clearly seeded over there. The halflings eventually migrate over and come into the old world. The ogres largely stay there in the mountains of Morn and around that area, and then slowly but surely migrate across the world with their own populations. But the old ones clearly had population areas for each one of the species, with that spine of the world being the original foundation point for the dwarfs.
Confusion, off topic a bit, but what if the elves weren't assholes? Also, you guys are awesome.
Good luck.
As a what if series, that's so funny. What if the elves just weren't dicks? Aaron's favorite, hello, my glorious long beards. Join the discussion. Maybe for your next one, you could do what if Snorri Whitebeard went with Malekith to rout out the cults? Or what if the dwarves went to Ulthuan? That would be an interesting one as well.
Yeah, there's, I think, a lot of really good what ifs around Snorri, Malekith, and that whole story.
Malekith is like the what if character.
I mean, as much as we're focusing on one of the strongest what if cards as Mazdamundi, I would argue that possibly one of the most important beyond that, Malekith, and beyond that, I mean, Nagash. Is there any who are as big? Yeah. There's very few, but yeah, Malekith's a good one, and picking one out, that'll be fun.
Necromancer Cobalt. The second thing I think I'll like about the series is here's this weirdo you haven't heard of since the 80s, the odd bullshit they could do. That's
our job, isn't it?
Dynamite, if they get people like humans to move, would they use the old one pass or just leave them to do it themselves? So if they persuade the humans of in to go to the old world, would they be teleported? I think it would. I think most of the time,
mass migration handled by the lizardmen, definitely. They are going to be pushing for what they think is the right way of the world being, and they will be happy using the paths of the old world. The question is, are the populations that are being shunted around going to be happy with this? And I think the answer for this is almost universally going to be no. But
People
that doesn't mean that the lizardmen don't have methods of trying to control them.
Yep. Elijah Snow, in my Woofer game, I'm definitely emphasizing some of this lost technology. I'm directly addressing whatever the Spear of the Gods is, and why the West, the City of the Sun, is safe from Eastern invasion. Yeah, fun stuff like that. Also, if you watch, oh man, I'm having, oh damn it, there was something I wanted to say in regard to LAWhammer, and now I'm having a mind blank about it. It makes me sad. It'll come back to me later.
LAWhammer.
I feel a Ragnarok coming on. Yeah, it had to do with the Slan like getting into people's heads and telling them things. Oh, now I remember. If you go watch LAWhammer, go watch the episode where Magnus the Pious is being played and he's talking about his miracles, and think about how the Olgu Slan could have theoretically been involved in such things. And you go,
that was an interesting episode. There's actually a couple of episodes of Magnus the Pious, so make sure you catch the right one.
Yeah. Feel right. Yes, the greenskins are definitely gonna have a thing here. So the lizard spawning is almost as scary as greenskin spawning. Yeah, I would say greenskin spawning is scarier, but they're.
I would say greenskin spawning is much scarier, but lizardman spawning under the correct conditions can move at a pace that will surprise many. The lizardmen are known for being slow, for taking things deliberately, because the Slan have been caught underneath a spell of moving slow and taking things deliberately. What happens when the Slan are taken out and these floating frog gods can now just go, this city, whoosh, caught underneath as they start building and going crazy at a speed that from the outside looks impossible. Because they've got enormous spells of working at hand, and entire cities start reconstructing. Entire spawning pools of armies within days are pulling out, all trained and good to go, moving by their thousands and then sometimes tens of thousands. It is frankly scary, and the Chaos Gods are going to have to step in fast.
Yep. And then in Go Trek Realm Slayer, he talks about Felix almost being killed by Amazons on the Dragon Isles. They're part of the Great Plan. Plays Rig, the Mother of War. I mean, I think the Amazons would be part of the Great Plan. Now, would the Amazons help willingly is kind of an interesting discussion. But I don't think Mazdamundi would seek to destroy them.
Yeah, the Amazons are a fun one.
Yeah, because the Amazons might be like, we're not getting involved. Like, you have fun. Or they might be like, hey, bust out the treasury. Let's go kick ass with bubblegum.
I'm quite looking forward to this bullshit version we're going for.
Real
Good
quick,
times.
I'm setting up the next poll of continuing y'all's pick a path. Which of the younger races does Mazdamundi speak to first? And I'm going to give y'all the option of the elves, the dwarfs, men of the old world, essentially. So I'm just going to say men.
Humans.
And then humans, and then Cathay will be the last option. So who do y'all think he's going to speak to first? Because I have different plans for y'all's little adventure and different discussions depending on which y'all decide to go to first. It won't be the same. If y'all pick one race before another, things will change. I've been thinking about this a lot for the last 3 days. Hendrik, problem with the old ones. Do you change the old ones' motivation? Or are we still moving to blow up? If so, why would there be more spawnings? So the old ones work in very strange, mysterious ways. And also, who's to say that their intended destruction of the world was by chaos blowing it up? Maybe another method could be taken.
Oh, damn straight. I think you might be thinking what I'm thinking.
Yeah, there's more than one way to cook an omelet, as the saying goes.
It certainly is.
Captain Magma, what if the Skaven won the war against Mandrid Skaven Slayer and conquered the Empire? That'd be a fun one too. What if the Skaven take the Empire?
That would be a super fun one because empires rise and fall. Contrary to what Warhammer might make you believe, where they often go, this empire will last forever because I made it once. And they say the same empire is in place 2,000 years later because reasons. So yeah, that could be a super fun one.
All right, I added that one to the list. Nagarash, nothing can go toad on toad with it. A toad to toad, not toad on. That's a yes, yeah. Hagen, I feel like Gork and Mork will be sitting on top. Gork and Mork, listen, it doesn't matter which what if we do. If it involves an apocalyptic war, Gork and Mork are going, let's have fun. Yeah,
so
they
true.
Don't care. They don't care. They're just here to have fun. Dino Man, Zotes are also in 40K. Yep. Yeah, I saw them in the black.
I referenced that with my Tyrannid comment.
Yeah, Battlefield 78. Mazda should just join Cathay through marrying someone.
Marriage, definitely. I'm up for that.
Power struggle for the ages. Oh, making like a polycule with the Emperor of the Moon Empress? Of course. The simplest but yet most effective answer. Of course. Why didn't we think of that?
Yep. And you say, why didn't we think about that? As I said, I have done this in one of my games before, and I am horrified to say a marriage was involved.
Oh my good lord. We will end the stream with Andy revealing what his version of this was. We're going to end with it. That'll be fun.
Mental.
Psychological bet. Thank you very much. Dino Man, do you think under Mounts' direction we might see other Slan on big dino mounts? Yeah, that would probably be likely.
So Dino Man, I'd go further and say it's not just going to be Slan on dino mounts. The great plan is not just the Lizardmen.
Yep. Amadeus Arkham. What if Nagash had morals? What if instead of thinking not for me when seeing a man die, he thought not for us? So what if Nagash had empathy?
I mean, I think that there's a really good idea in here somewhere, but I think we would be better going back to when he was a young man and having him come to a different conclusion because of a particular event. Perhaps something with the Dark Elves, or perhaps he falls in love and it doesn't manifest in the ugly, selfish fashion that it quite clearly did when he was alive. So, but I definitely think there's something in that.
Yeah, I wrote something down relating to that. Psychological bit. There you are. Hi, Andy and Sotek. Love Lorebeards, learning all the great lore. What if a Narian had never met Morathy? Ooh, that's an interesting one.
The elves might have fallen.
Yeah,
I think that would be a super fun one.
Yeah, if anything, the world would probably be way uglier, ironically.
Yeah. It's one of those things where you're like, well, surely that'll be better, and then you're like, oh, actually, I think it might be much worse.
Yeah, I am.
That'd be super fun.
Yeah, like Anarian goes to save Marathi, but she's killed by the demons before he gets there, or something like that, or like dies in the fight. How would that have changed things? This is another only scheme. It always is. Jack Rabbit, what if the elves and orcs had decided to use black powder? So we actually do have a scenario where orcs have used black powder in 2 different stories, and the answer is it's fucking terrifying. Orcs using black powder is like a borderline game over when they figure out how to use it. Luckily, it's very rare, but it has happened before, and it's really, really spooky when it does. And then, Don, man, what if the Dragon Emperor managed to get control of the geomantic web? That would be a fun one.
I think that's a fascinating one, and very much something that the Dragon Emperor could be looking to do. So I think works really well. Okay, what we're on to next.
So Chad has been doing a poll while we've been doing this, and it's just about done. On the geomantic. Sorry, I'm writing these down so I don't forget them in the future. The winner of which of the younger races does Mazdamundi speak to first is the elves.
Yeah, it's inevitable. It is absolutely inevitable. Do you want to start on that one, since clearly you have ideas?
I do, and I'm curious if Andy will agree with this, because I think the elves are by far genuinely the most fascinating case. And the reason for this is because specifically of the Dark Elves. Because when a lot of you hear what we're talking about, you go, oh, Mazdamundi's going to go up to Nagaroth and he's going to unleash fire and brimstone and hell and fight the Dark Elves. There's not going to be a fight. There will be no fight. He's going to go, the Lizardmen will send messengers, Mazdamundi will arrive, marching up on Slack through some great portal before the Dark Elves, and he will say, you must go back to Ulthuan. And I think the Dark Elves would look at that and go, of course.
I don't think so.
You don't think so? I think they would go back.
No, I don't think that's what you do at all. I think you would be speaking directly to Malekith, telling him it's time for you to claim your position. You are the Emperor. Go.
Oh, yeah, like manipulating him.
Yeah, but we've got to realize we're not dealing with someone who's going to be necessarily marching armies around to everybody, because he has limited resources.
Teach you method.
Okay, he is very much, he's got in his skill set the ability to directly communicate with anyone, anywhere. And on top of that, we have the very real awareness that he understands the gods, the elven gods. He was part of the process of putting them into place in Ulthuan with the elves. He was there at the beginning. He knows who the elven gods are, and he knows what went down in that flame. And he's going to make it quite clear, I know. And if you know anything about Mazdamundi, anyone that faces Mazdamundi does one of 2 things. They immediately bend down and worship, or alternatively, they can hold their back. Very few can do that latter part, because he is such an extraordinarily powerful and majestic entity. And this is where a rock meets a hard place, because he is effectively a representative of a god who is in denial of what he is. And then we have Mazdamundi on the other side, who understands exactly what he represents in terms of what he is to the elves and why the elves are broken. He can see where the great plan has been struck in 2 here, and this is the entity that needs to make it happen. And how does he do it? He does it by telling him to do it through communication and having the White Dwarf arrive.
Oh, yeah. Man, because I think
because he knows.
Yeah, I think this actually ties back to the quote I read earlier from the 8th edition book, where it says Mazdamundi can see like the skeins of fate, those that are being manipulated, those going to their natural conclusion.
Yes.
And he goes, I'm going to pluck this one.
And this, because Malekith has been manipulated pretty much from the beginning, right from the outset. And this is a thread through the skeins of fate that he has to cut. And how does he cut it? By going back to the man that he once was and reminding him of what he was, bringing Snorri to the table and effectively going, you are supposed to be there. Now, will the Dark Elves accept this? No, it's going to be a civil war. But it's the civil war that Malekith will most certainly be on one side of. Now, we've got a pretty strong end times version of how that could occur. This is loosely what Mazdamundi will be looking to do with the elves, which is consolidate them back together underneath a single Phoenix King and bring them over to Ulthuan, where they can tend Ulthuan, do everything that Ulthuan requires, and the elven gods can be brought back to their full strength again. That is what they should be doing.
So I want to pull up a couple of comments to address a few things of how would Marathi react to this. Marathi, I think, would be a little
Son's
bit
getting what he deserves.
Yeah, I think Marathi would very much be, this works to my ambitions. Like, there's something going on here, but I can take advantage of this because that's what she does best.
Yeah.
A situation is put in front of her, and if it works for her, she pushes it, and I think she would push this hard.
Elves are going to elf. Elves going to elf. There's all sorts of politics here. The bigger issue with the elves is arguably not the Dark Elves. It's going to fall to civil war, but Malekith knows his people better than any. He will control this shit. The bigger issue, again, not necessarily the High Elves. It's the Wood Elves.
Yeah, the Wood Elves are ugly.
Problematic. Massively so. But in some respects, perhaps less problematic than many believe, because they are so strongly influenced by their gods that Mazdamundi, in this enlightened position, understands. He can speak directly to the gods as they exist. He can speak potentially not necessarily through them, but in sympathy with them. And the goal here is to bring the chaos, awfulness under heel. Most of the elven gods would be up for that. Indeed, many of the elven gods that you might think of as deeply against this sort of thing, Hecate, for example, she's all about the chaos magic and the dark and all that, but that was all to destroy chaos. And she loved the elves. And the elves are now a broken, fractured species. And we now have a potential fix for that. I think that for all the elves look like they would be an absolutely broken, never be able to be pulled together group, with the help of the gods, suddenly it becomes a bit more uncertain. But I will say that the Wood Elves are going to be deeply problematic because so many of them are so caught up in their dream of the forest and their dream of the spirits, of the way the cycle of life cycles through their entire existence. And removing them from that is to almost no longer make them Wood Elves. Many, many, many will resist. There will be conflict.
Yeah, I think I agree 100% with Andy that like both the Darkness and the High Elves I think would get embroiled in civil war for a bit as different factions take sides. That I think it would be like the end times but better because we wouldn't have the whole silliness with the Everchild and Tyrion going completely batshit crazy and stuff. Instead, you have Mazdamundi using this method to also reach out to Teclis because we know Teclis is actually sympathetic to the reunification of the elves. Teclis understands that as like an actual good strategy. Now, there will be some, like Tyrion, who I think will still take on kind of a more wrathful approach to what's happening, because that's kind of his nature. But like the High Elves and the Dark Elves are pretty much going to sort themselves out. I actually don't think the Lizardmen would be that involved beyond maybe supplying the occasional units to maintain.
They'd be pulling the strings.
Yeah, pulling the strings, but otherwise kind of staying out of it.
Yeah, it's the best way to deal with the elves. If you deal with them directly, they are exceedingly powerful. They've got gods at their beck and call. They've got massively powerful magic, but they are, as a species, very self-determined and ultimately broken by chaos. And if you know why they're broken, it's not impossible to see a way of basically gluing them back together and hopefully turning them into something that will work. I broadly think that they will be, perhaps surprisingly, one of the easier groups to deal with, but they are almost certainly going to require something that Mazdamundi doesn't have, but very quickly will have, which is an external threat. There's going to have to be a reason for them to have the impetus to agree, to go along with this, and the threat of annihilation and extermination is a very good reason to move on. It's why Teclis did what he did in the End Times material. He didn't do it just because he was like, yeah, I'm up for this
luckily for Mazdamundi's plans, it is 2522.
Yeah, we're about to hit Arceus on the end of the world anyway, so all of these threats together will be more than enough, I think, to at least channel them into the correct direction, and ultimately, for the very obvious reason, to keep the vortex in place. None of this Malekith brings it down bullshit. No, Malekith protects it. In the complete flip of what it should be until the day it's meant to be brought down so that magic can flood the world clearly and make the Slann even more powerful as magic goes wild.
Yeah, because I think that would be the biggest thing Mazdamundi would immediately say that, like, and I agree with y'all. I think y'all made the right choice of what Mazdamundi should do, of securing Ulthuan first, of making sure that the elves are unified, protecting the vortex, because the vortex is that perfect weapon the Slann need, because the reason they lost the Cataclysm War against the demons was that there was too much. Magic was completely out of control. It was spilling over the world. The demons can manifest anywhere and everywhere, and they just kept coming back endlessly in their billions. And while there was so much magic, the demons had a better control over this new chaotic form of magic. Mm-hmm. And the Slann got overwhelmed. But with the vortex in place, demons can't do that. There's not enough of that raw chaos magic, and the Slann can pull on the geomantic web. They have this extra power base of magic to pull on to kind of buoy them up. The vortex might need to go down, but not until the proper moment.
Not until they control it. Indeed, it's properly controlled, and now we're following a plan. It's not just simply, shit, it's all gone wrong. So yeah, I agree pretty much with all of that. And that then leaves us with, assuming that this broadly works, a wood elf realm that has been left to the spirits, has been left to the Zotes, has been left to the entities that are potentially powerful there, and then they are getting support from the Slann through the world roots and the old ones.
And what's fascinating to imagine is how like this would be the first genuinely terrifying act of the Lizardmen, I think, would be the War of Athel Loren, of the elves that refuse to leave, thinking, oh, we're in Athel Loren, they can't get to us, and then suddenly realizing that the Lizardmen have a understanding of Athel Loren. They were, some of them, Mazdamundi was there when it was planted.
Yeah.
But there are
having the spirits turn on them.
They're sympathetic to him. Like, this would be Drycha and Coadil saying, this is our guy. This is our guy. They're not teaming up with Bellator.
Okay, Mazdamundi coming and going, you have been tainted by chaos. You're going down. And I could see Drycha be a core example of that. Drycha's kind of lost to its hatred, to its deep internal turmoil. So I could see some of them doing exactly that and others not. It would be a horrible war.
Yeah, because what I think is that when the Lizardmen start that attack, and like some of the elves, very few of them, but some of them and certainly some of the spirits, especially with probably the support of the Zotes, I would imagine, are fighting against the elves to push them out and say, you must return to Avalorn, you must go back. You must go back. But Drycha and her cohorts break free of the Wild One, are taking advantage of this chaos to kill as many elves as they possibly can. So the elves are being attacked by a third party. The Lizardmen are not sympathetic to that party and will probably kill them later. Like, you can imagine that moment where, like, the crazy elves, like the elves are holding, and all of a sudden the trees like the elves.
I think it's quite possible you might not actually require any Lizardmen at all here. I think it could just be elves versus elves. And spirits versus elves. That's
honestly the scariest thing to realize about a lot of this, is how much Mazdamundi, especially like when we talked about with the Tichuichi and stuff, that the Slann are in a really good position against a lot of these races to just pull a particular string.
Yeah, the Lizardmen are going to be needed to deal with chaos orcs, greenskins, those that are unruly and will never, ever pay that much attention to the external threats when they have their own gods who will step in and stop them. So when it comes to the elves, I think most of it will be dealt with by the elves, and it will, after, unfortunately, a significant amount of bloodshed, end up with probably Malekith ruling from Ulthuan. And probably from Nagarythe in the north, as the capital shifts, as the old big black arcs return and new cities are established in the north. It would be an enclosed and then quickly fortified area for the great chaos assault that's likely to come.
Yeah, so thanks to y'all's vote, chat, we have a fairly brief, probably 3 to 5-ish year civil war among the elves, and a massacre in Athel Loren. The Loren elves might have been a little easier to shift, but there probably still would be some ugly violence there as well. of the wood elves are very heavily decimated, but what's left of them is finally forced out. The spiritual that pact that was made by Durthu is destroyed or sundered, which may have consequences, as we'll see. So the Athalorn is now ruled by the spirits, though those that are chaos corrupted have been killed. Coadil is dead. Drycha is dead. Now, what would be scary would be whether or not Durthu died. Because if Durthu survives, then
I think he might end up being King of the Wood.
Yeah, then Durthu becomes the new King of the Wood, and he's the last elder, which, if we follow what the end times established, once Kodo goes down, Durthu gains enough power that he finally kind of wakes up. He finally is able to cast off his anger, see for the first time, and become the true King in the Wood.
And if you go back to our stream about Durthu, holy crap, is he powerful as a potential
this is not
entity.
A bad thing in a lot of ways.
This is big, and it will be the realignment of the spirits of Athalloran, which in turn will start allowing the world roots to regrow healthy again. But we're going to have a lot of resistance here, both from spirits that believe they're right that have fallen, from beastmen who are almost certainly going to be trying to infiltrate the wood. There's going to be a lot of difficulty in all this, and I also think it's quite likely that Orion and Ariel will be on the wrong side. Ariel is corrupted. She's properly broken. Orion has lost himself to the wood in a way that is horrendous. They are not truly speaking the avatars of the gods as we saw them expressed through other Elvens. Examples like Death with Vol, for example. So I think it's quite likely that they will fall here. Ariel and Orion will be killed in this war. The king and the queen of the wood will fall and be replaced by the spirits. It gives us a nice storytelling handover of power as well. Perhaps Durthu is responsible for this as well, in many respects having to come face to face with his own failure in the past for allowing all of this to occur. That should never have happened. It's going to be a bit of a heart-wrenching story. There's lots of cool shit you could do with that.
Yeah, that would be beautifully heart-wrenching. Of like Durthu like going up against like a crippled or like fallen Ariel and having to talk about everything that's happened.
And perhaps even saying, you've got to go, you've got to get out of here, and them refusing because it's their wood. But they are now the corrupting influence in the heart of the wood.
Yeah, this would also have a dramatic impact of now Aisha no longer is split between the Everqueen
straight
and
over to Alariel.
Now straight over to Alariel.
Yeah.
So another big interesting development there. So that's the elf situation handled.
Me, that's pretty awesome.
That's pretty awesome. So Mazdamundi has managed to, for the most part, get a pretty sizable ally in Athalorn in the old world, and also the Laralorn Forest. And he's also gotten the elves to really shack up an Ulthuan. All of the elves have been pulled back from the various colonies. The Lizardmen have now taken over the defense of the colonies because they're really built on top of old one sites anyway. So the Lizardmen are reestablishing their own garrisons in various pockets across the world. And Ulthuan now has a unified elven race that has suffered some tremendous losses and has some political issues, but is ultimately seeing the horror that is on the horizon as Mazdamundi communicates to them through dreams or through his form of communication.
And I would argue at this point,
was
it might not
merely
even Mazdamundi, it's the Slan.
Yeah, the Slan, as a whole.
As a whole, they are now working in concert. So think of Mazdamundi as purely the peak of the top of the Great Pyramid of Slan that are now orchestrating what they believe will be the saving of the Warhammer world. But what saving means to them might be very different to what saving means to, say, the elves.
Yep. Okay. I'm working. I'm getting another poll up about whether y'all want to have Mazdamundi continue to talk to another race, or whether he begins the first phase of an extermination plan. Because there are various stages to these. Okay, so while they're doing that, I can also get into super chats. So we were at here. Crackpot theory. What if Grimgor swore loyalty to Karl Franz when he's not immortals?
Hey, Aaron, that is indeed a crackpot theory.
If me and Andy ever get to the point where we're just smoking weed on stream, maybe we'll do these kinds of theories. Ruby Jackman, what if Sigmar had died to Nagash? That's another really, really good one. Yeah, Nagash and Sigmar can have a lot of what ifs.
What if Nagash claimed his crown? Ooh.
Yeah. Captain Magma, what if Be'lakor had never been punished? That would be kind of interesting. What if he had never been cast into his shadow form by Tzeentch?
Arguably, everything would have landed different with the Everchosen. They might never have happened.
Yeah,
it might be just Be'lakor.
Yeah, it would have been. He would have just been the Everchosen.
Yeah, forever.
What if Sigmar had not? Oh, what if Sigmar had not abdicated his throne, but had simply died of old age?
Yeah,
that would have been interesting. That would have changed some big things about his story.
Yeah.
Andres, Lizardman Druki Alliance versus Chaos is my hopium. It's actually a lot more likely than a lot of people think because it's such a classic fight. There are elements of it that are far more likely, especially because the Lizardmen. The thing that would be interesting about Mazdamundi is I actually agree a lot with Andy of that he probably would not commit forces and get involved if he didn't need to. Yeah. And in the Elven case, he wouldn't need to. So there's not really this issue. He would not yet, he might eventually, but he would not yet be concerned about purging like the darker influence among the elves. Like Marathi would probably, if her and Mazdamundi met, it would probably not go terribly well. But
it depends on which version of Marathi you go for. If you go for the one where she is tainted and lost, then she's dead.
Yeah,
that's it. She's dead.
Yeah. But
if we go with where Age of Sigmar eventually goes to, she's not really tainted and lost. She's a far more complicated figure than that.
Yeah, which I do prefer that version of her.
Which, if that's the case, then she's not dead. She's an elf doing what elves are supposed to do, which is manipulating the spiritual.
Yeah, actually, for the most part, I think the elves would really be fine because they'd still be stuck with their pantheon. There wouldn't be these chaos elves outside of, like, there are chaos elves, but they would be elsewhere. And those ones would get, but to be frank, Malekith hates them anyway. Malekith would be very on board, I think, with a lot of what Mazdamundi would want.
Yep, I think that the elves, perhaps surprisingly, are not going to come out of this in necessarily the worst shape, but there's going to be some terrible civil issues. Just think of just Malekith being an Ulthuan to begin with, but it can work and
a lot of people are going
to work in a variety of ways. It's going to be difficult.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of death.
And as surprising as this may sound, the number of dark elves, wood elves, and high elves lost to this because they are corrupt would probably be relatively equal. There'd be as many high elves being lost as wood elves and dark elves. Now, you might go, well, does that mean they've all fallen to chaos? No, they're corrupt. So, for example, the wood elves, we know that many of them have corrupted because they've used dark magics. They've done a variety of things that have twisted their souls and twisted how they work with the local spirits. They're no longer what elves should be as far as Mazdamundi is concerned. And that's what I mean by corrupt. Elves who aren't following the great plan. And they would be, broadly speaking, wiped out.
Yeah, there would be a lot of interesting special characters would die. Like a Lithanar, he would have to die.
Yeah, absolutely.
In this scenario. Orion and Ariel, they would both have to die.
I could make a story where he didn't, but yes, on the face of it,
at the very least, he would be a terrorist.
Yeah, it would be bad.
He would be a problem. Oh wait, nope, I hadn't read that one yet. Baron von Basser, can Dread Saurians be truly tamed like Carnosaurus and Stegodons? I just pictured Nakai on the back of one looking lost and trying to read a map sometimes with a double-decker croc. They seem to be, because the Lizardmen are able to mount haudas and put artifacts and stuff on them. Dread Saurians would be unleashed in this scenario. There would be Dread Saurians marching on battlefields. So yeah, I would say yeah. Though it is very funny to imagine Nakai being lost and trying to consult the map. Donovan, Lizardmen convinced that help all the Dark Elves move back to Ulthuan en masse. Potentially there could be conflict with the Lizardmen or helping the Dark Elves move back to Ulthuan, or from the Serb perspective, potentially being invaded. So kind of like we said, I don't think the Lizardmen would actually go to Ulthuan. I think they would allow the elves to handle their own affairs so long as they're there. What happens there isn't really Mazdamundi's concern as long as like chaos isn't allowed to thrive. But if the elves are fighting among themselves, fine, whatever.
Yeah,
I don't care.
In this particular instance, you have to see Lord Mazdamundi and the Frog Chorus almost like a concert of greater demons of Tzeentch, in that fate itself is their plaything, and they can see where the corrupted threads of fate lie. This is written into Mazdamundi's background. It's literally what he does, and he can look at it all, the big pattern that is Ulthuan, and snip at all those broken threads, leaving what should be something that is pure and perfect behind. Now, that sounds like a neat way of fixing it. But what does that mean in reality? A lot of death, war, heartache, and bloodshed. It isn't going to be pretty.
Oh yeah, there would be a lot of places where the impact would be horrific. Like it would be very ugly. There'd be a lot of suffering. And I mean, but Mazdamundi would be very much, this is for the greater good. Okay, so chat has decided that no, Mazdamundi is not yet ready to launch his war of extermination. He desires to speak with another of the younger races. So who will he talk to next, chat? You've taken the elf situation out of the equation. So we still have the dwarfs, humans, and Grand Cathay as being priorities on his list.
I would also add ogres / halflings.
Okay, yep, we can go ahead and add ogres / halflings. Because now we have another open slot.
We have a slot. Yeah. Ogres are a tough shout.
Yeah, ogres.
Ooh, they're tough.
You imagine the ogres being like, you have to go home. And the ogres being like, that's home now. Mazdamundi looking, being like, oh, that's not right. that wasn't there last time I looked.
Yeah. Holy crap! How'd you deal with those? I'm putting my feet up over here as I have a wee think about them.
Okay, so those polls are up as we continue through some super chats. Dynaman, would Drycha be very eager to help Mazdamundi get the elves out of Ethel-Loren? I think Drycha would be very eager to take advantage of what Mazdamundi unleashed.
Yeah.
She would be kind of in that thread of fate thing. Her and Coadil would be a key thread of fate to Mazdamundi, seeing how Ethel-Loren's situation is going to tumble out of control. That being said, he would also be very determined that those two threads, while useful tools to be manipulated, once they had served their purpose, they would need to be snipped.
Yeah, I agreed completely. They need to get the fucking elf gods out of there to ensure that the beastmen that want to come and eat the elven gods can't.
Yeah, but this is a much more realistic version of Drycha and Coadil's action instead of the dumbassery we got in the end times where Bellica was like, you want to team up? And they were like, yeah!
Yeah. God. Quite. Holy moly.
Chapter Grim, where would Finnebar fall in all the elf malarkey? Finnebar would die.
Yeah, Finnebar would be a toughie. Now, Finnebar is not necessarily a figure who is corrupt. In fact, in many respects, he could be argued to be a strong influence upon the elves towards potential good. But if we look at what Finnebar's core drive is, it's to open the doors and get the elves out there around the world.
Yeah, he represents the opposite.
It's against Mazdamundi's plan. So he is someone who is, at heart, corrupt. And that means that he is very likely to die in this particular conflict. Now, I'm sure there are methods that we could bring him in. Lots of really cool stories that would allow that to occur. But ultimately, we're looking at some sort of cool story for both Malekith, Marathi, the twins. Exactly how does the Phoenix King work with all of that? I think the ultimate answer is he's not going to be Phoenix King any longer. It doesn't actually matter what the story is that resolves it. He's most likely going to die.
Yeah, I think there would be a really fun tragedy to have Finnebar be that very empathetic character who looks at it from a very moral perspective of saying, we're being manipulated. Like, I could see him being the character that says, we're being manipulated by something. This is wrong. And other characters saying it's, almost that greater good situation of Finnebar refusing to bow to the greater good, and that's what gets him killed.
I could very easily see him and Tyrion, for example, being forces against the change, and possibly both of them falling. I could see both of them dying in this, and Teclis not. I could see Teclis being in a very strong position with his, ultimate uncle, I suppose.
Yep, and that would be super tragic. And unlike the end times, we wouldn't do the stupid shit of bringing Tyrion back to life once he dies. We'd let it serve as a terrible tragedy.
Yeah, it would be awful. And it would be something that would prey upon Teclis as well, and give Teclis some deep heartache, which would be super fun.
Yeah, plus we could still have that heartbreaking family dynamic of the Everqueen and Tyrion's daughter being like, oh my god, we could finally reunify the elves. We can restore Ulthuan, we can heal so much damage, and Tyrion being like, no, I can't forgive all this stuff these people have done. I have to fight them. Yeah, I think
Tyrion is always someone who is pure of heart to the point of being bad. I mean, he goes too far, way too far. He is, in terms of the way we're depicting it here, corrupt because he's no longer working towards the great plan. His pride gets in the way, his own need to do the right thing. Where Teclis has always been more calculating, has always been much more of the I'll do what needs to be done individual rather than I'll do what I want to do.
Yep. Ricky Chapman, Durthu gets Lizardman mandated therapy.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Red Salamander, what is the relationship between the old ones / Slaanesh and the non-chaos gods of Warhammer, such as the elven gods? Are there hints of link between the two? Yes,
absolutely.
They were around at the same time.
So at its shortest, without going into any great description here because we don't have time, the elven gods and the elves were both at one with each other while the old ones were making it happen. So the elven gods are a part of the great plan. So that's what loosely we need to answer there.
Go watch the old one stream. We talked a lot about this in depth.
We did.
The old one stream.
Absolutely.
Simon the Emperor, would Carrick Zorn be significant to Mazdamundi's plans for the dwarves? Yes. I think it absolutely 100% would.
Yeah, let's get down to that when we move to the dwarves.
Speaking of which, perfect time to put a pause on Super Chats there, because the next poll has ended, and y'all have decided that Mazdamundi should go talk to the dwarves. Thank you for all the votes, by the way. So, Mazdamundi has unified the elves. Ulthuan, although...
is unifying the elves.
Yeah, it's unifying the elves. Civil wars have broken out, but he sees where it's going and is ultimately pleased. So now he turns his attention to the next children of the old ones that came after the elves, the Dawi. And here is a very, very interesting scenario because there are some positives and negatives. The positive for what Mazdamundi wants is, in some ways, you could very much argue it is what many of the dwarfs want, which is Mazdamundi wants them to reclaim the Karazhan-Kor. He wants them to take back the mountains, take back their fallen holds, and go back into the mountains. He doesn't want them out in the plains. He doesn't want them out living amongst the humans. He doesn't want them like dawdling off on the ocean. He wants them in the mountains where they come from. And there are many dwarves that would be sympathetic to that. However, Mazdamundi also relies on some interesting forms of kind of that manipulation. Now, we know the dwarves are subject to it. We see King Gunderdrak fell for it. So there is a thread there of they might be able to use that idea of the ancestors coming to them. But there are some among the Dawi that might see through that ruse and be very, very... I
don't think it'll be a ruse.
Ooh, you don't think it'll be a ruse at all?
Nope, I think they work through the Glittering Realm and the Ancestor Gods. Because we're not dealing here with people who don't understand what happened at the beginning. We are dealing with Mazdamundi, who was there at the beginning. And he fully understands the Glittering Realm. That is almost the contact point between the old ones and the dwarfs. He understands the ancient dwarfs, who are the starting point of all of the dwarfs. I think of all the species, the dwarfs are by far the easiest. By far. Because they go through the Glittering Realm, they say, hey, we're back. The Ancestor Gods, most of whom still exist in some fashion or another, go, oh shit, fuck, we're off, let's go. And they're all extracted and pushed, and they, in turn, like emissaries of the old ones themselves, return to their people and say, let's get our shit together.
So I think there's actually a cool reinforcement here that the path chat has chosen. I think this would actually be one of the first great battles, which you may go, against who? And I'll tell you that one of the things that's really fascinating about the story of Carrick Zorn is what happened to it. Why did Carrick Zorn go silent? What's going on there? And the only story we ever got in regards to it, which does tell a very interesting tale, is in the War of Vengeance trilogy. Which the War of Vengeance trilogy has a character who claims to be from Carrick Zorn, but spoilers, but it's an old book, and this doesn't ruin too much of it. But it's revealed that this character is literally a greater demon of Tzeentch.
Yeah.
He is a Lord of Change masquerading as a dwarf. And he reveals what happens to Carrick Zorn, but he's also probably a liar. In that he blames it on a strange species of lizard creatures that attacked the hold. But it's far more likely that Tzeentch removed a major player from the game, which if you believe if you know the history of the ancestor gods in the Glittering Realm, Tzeentch cut off the dwarfs from the ancestor gods. So it is quite likely, I think what would happen is Mazdamundi would lead an army to Karak Zorn where Tzeentch has
to reclaim
that place under his fist. And we would have our first great battle of this age, which is the Lizardmen reclaiming Karak Zorn for the dwarfs.
And the return of the ancestor gods.
Yeah,
which would combine the two. It would be epic.
It would be huge. Of the Glittering Realm finally bursting open and the gods themselves, Grugni, returning.
Yeah. Valea returning. In fact, Smednir, the lot, returning.
Everyone basically except
with only
Grimnir.
one not returning, because one of them is obviously doing the Slayer oath elsewhere.
He's busy.
being a mentalist, holding off an entire Chaos Gate by himself. And I think that's a little note of what we should expect from these entities. In the same way that the elven gods are coming back to the elves, the dwarven gods are coming back to the dwarfs, because they are all part of the great plan. And we know that the old ones in particular were manipulating, using, somehow coercing or controlling, whatever particular word you want to use to say that they were very much shaping the dwarfs using the ancestor gods. The ancestor gods through the Glittering Realm were being given information, how the dwarfs should develop themselves. They were given tools so that they could better understand runes. The ancestor gods themselves were handed information by the old ones, and in turn, that almost certainly means the old ones were using their mortal, let's say, agents on the world, the Slan. The Slan are the ones who can do this. So we have a lovely first step in, and potentially, yes, I think, the reclaiming of that lost hold and starting, in truth, the reclaiming of the old dwarf empire and bringing it back is something that the High King would be very supportive of. Not just because that is pretty much his goal too, but because his ancestors are coming back and saying, this is what we're doing. It's too awesome.
Yeah, this would literally give Thorgrim what the 8th edition storyline had been setting up, what he'd been waiting for, which is to initiate the Age of Reclamation, the Age of Reckoning.
Yeah. Totally.
And they've got help of that. There is a particular enemy that the Lizardmen, in this case, would actually be invested in dealing with. Being, of course, some Skaven stuff. But it's time for the next vote, which is started now, about what happens next. Make sure you are voting, because y'all are helping us weave this narrative. This is happening in this chronological order. So if y'all decide extermination, we're going to talk about fighting one of the bad guy races, or one of the not part of the Great Plan races. I shouldn't say bad guy, because some of these races that are going to get caught up in this is going to be genuinely tragic. But or does he speak again to someone else? He's gotten a lot of ducks in a row, but maybe it's time for him to drop the hammer on someone.
Cool. Let's slam through some super chats.
Yes. Aaron Strever, what if it turned out Magnus the Pious was really a mage and his miracles was just using spells strictly to the Electric Counts?
You know what? I'm going to suggest to you that if you what if that, you get the same result.
Yeah, pretty much. Literally nothing would change.
It's a really good one, Aaron. And yeah, watch LAWhammer. Scratch.
Yeah, that's a great what if that would change absolutely nothing.
Yeah, super fun.
Captain Magma, what of the non-Cathay dragons in the scenario? We will get to dragons at a later point. We're not
I will say that so far we've got some dragons involved with the elves, and they are currently in Ulthuan. That'll do for at least this step.
The elven dragons will be fine.
Yeah,
we'll talk about the other dragons in a little while.
Yup.
Dino Man, what if the hobgoblins had not betrayed the greenskins in the slave rebellion? Oh, that's a great one.
That's a good one, Dino Man. Like that.
The hobgoblins.
Holy crap! Just think how different things might be over in the Darklands.
Yeah, because there would be no Chaos Dwarfs. To be honest.
Yeah, it would be different.
Yeah, that's a great one, Dino Man. Very good.
Yeah, that's a good what if.
Tolkarians, are centaurs part of the plan or any other non-human races?
So I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to say a species like the centaurs are, let's just assign them a place. Nagaroth. So let's just say that the Great Plains of Nagaroth are supposed to have centaurs in. Now, it could be somewhere else. It doesn't really matter because we're not going to be detailing every single species because, quite simply, that would be a 50-hour stream.
Yeah, we don't have time.
But what we can say is that whatever is supposed to be in Nagaroth is now in Nagaroth. And very likely it's a species like the centaurs.
Yep. Agree 100%. What if Todbringer had been elected instead of Karl Franz? That's another really, really good one. Yep. What if the Black Orcs were still subservient to the Torfs? That one.
I mean, they sort of are.
Yeah, it depends on which book you're looking at, but like that's not that extreme.
Yeah, I mean, I could I think we need a slightly better question at the heart of that one, Bloodclaw Bob, as in what we could do to really make that land in a way that makes you go, the Chaos Dwarves end up being enormously powerful because of what happens, and they sort of have a good chunk of that already, depending on the version of the background you go with.
Also, chat, make sure y'all vote if you haven't voted, because the vote is really close. Y'all are neck and neck. It is 42 versus 48 right now with 150 people voting. So get your votes in. Ricardo, Malekith, Tyrion, Teclis, Ilario, Nyastra, Arahan, Marismith, Laura Lord, all sat down at the dinner table to solve politics. Wow.
And it is a family dinner, 100%. Yeah. And this is one of the things.
Oh, yeah, they're all related. That's actually very funny.
They are literally all related. I did a bloodline for the Everqueens, and you will be horrified by how much incest there is with the elves.
Yeah, but they're not human. So
they're not human. They're elves, so it's totally fine. But from a human perspective, the amount of incest going on is remarkable.
Yep. Nagarash, what if Lamia hadn't fallen during the war? That's another really good one. What if Lamia...
What if the vampires weren't cursed? Oh, what a difference that would make.
Oh, yeah. Vampires not carrying out sunlight. Whoo, boy.
Yeah, that's like a whole thing, totally.
Could there be a scenario where Mazdamundi, a particularly strong Lord of Change, Kairos or Amon Shikai, having some kind of battle of wills, trying to both manipulate fate to ensure stuff at the end of the world? That's basically what's happening.
That's basically what's happening. And they are both going to start clipping, whilst on the other side, the greater demons responsible for that bullshit, they're going to be pushing hard for their end of the world, where their corruption from the Great Plan will stand. At the moment, the story that we've dealt with is very much the stuff that Mazdamundi can deal with relatively easily, which is the elves, because they were always part of the plan, and it's easy to see how to reinforce what they should be, assuming that you've got all the power that the Great Toad Chorus has. Same with the dwarfs. But we're about to go to some pretty dangerous places. Yeah,
so, and some good examples of how they actually very well may have been involved, but you're not realizing it because you're thinking a little too like, why aren't they attacking? Is like, well, Ariel and Orion were deep enough in that they couldn't, they fought back. Tyrion fights back. Like those corruptions, those are threads of fate being pulled by the enemy.
100%. And in this particular case, you would Nikari would be involved around here somewhere. There would be a host of demons who were attempting to control, manipulate, and infiltrate all around this. But we're just dealing with top tier stories with the core bits of it. But we're going to have all sorts of other stories running alongside this.
Oh yeah, all of Anarian's heirs in one place on one island. Nikari is about to lead an invasion down from the Anuli Mountains, and it's going to be epic. Mm-hmm. But so yeah, things are busy. Sign of the Emperor. This is part of what I love about Warhammer Fantasy. Malekith is actually the rightful ruler of the elves, and how inconvenient of a fact that is. Yeah, that's a fair way to put it. It'll get tomatoes thrown at you, but it is a fair way to put it. Aaron Streaver, with Orion and Ariel dead, maybe Morgar will no longer go after Athel Loren because the scent is gone. Yes,
exactly.
But he's gonna go other places, which makes him still very dangerous.
Holy shit, yes, he's a dangerous entity. But where does he go next? And I think that's a super fascinating question.
By the way,
need to be solved.
Morgar is who we're gonna do for the birthday Sunday stream. So not this Sunday.
That's in, not the Sunday, the Sunday after.
Yeah, we're doing Arbol this
birthday. Week. He's gonna be 16 finally.
16. Oh boy, such an exciting age I would happily go back to. Oh Jesus, spare me. Yeah, so that'll be something we'll talk about in that stream. Is a lot about him because I'm really excited for that. Andrew Holmes, it'll be fun to see what if the dwarves got their shit together and actually went out to go strike out every grudge, find slash start.
And
using
this would be something I think that would start causing problems because the grudge-based system that they have is going to get in the way of doing what Mazdamundi wants. And this is where civil issues will go. In many respects, the grudges that lie at the heart of the dwarves are a corruption from the Great Plan because they force dwarves to do things that are not in their best interests. They force dwarves to chase down things or refuse to do things that they absolutely should do. So this is where the big civil issues are going to rise from the dwarf side.
Yeah, the dwarves, interestingly enough, in this particular scenario, you could debate whether or not Mazdamundi realizes that they are a bit of a ticking time bomb. Right now, they would be very on board. Super on board, but there's gonna be a point where they're gonna start to run. They're gonna start being
come back here. That hold's not needed. Fuck off. That's my ancestral hold.
Yeah,
dwarves are stubborn, and they ain't going to be turning back anytime soon.
Whoa. What about Kaldor and the Dragon? So Kaldor Dragon Tamer are still in the vortex for the moment. And the Dragons of Ulthuan, the old ones were fine with them there. They've been there when the old ones were around, so I think it would be safe to presume that that relationship would still be intact.
Yeah, I'm pretty convinced that Kaldor Dragon Tamer is going to come out of the vortex at some point in this story, assuming we get there, and is probably an avatar of a god by this time.
Oh yeah.
No doubt about it in the slightest. But that's entirely dependent on whether we get to that part of the story.
Yep, Chapter Grim. What if neither Caspar, Tylus, or Ushoran had fallen? Oh, Ushoran's Empire? Yeah, those could be fun ones as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so the votes are done, and by a very narrow margin, y'all are sticking to the talk to another race.
Okay, where are we going to now?
I like the domestic disputes. Okay, so let me get the next poll going really fast of what race is next. So who does Mazdamundi talk to next? Does he talk to the humans, Grand Cathay, or the ogres / halflings? So I almost feel like it would be humans / halflings rather than ogres / halflings.
No, ogres, halflings, because the ogres and the halflings are part of the Great Plan together.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
The halflings shouldn't be in the old world. The halflings should be in the east. That's
very true. What race is next? Total diplomacy. Warhammer fans not voting for war. What is this?
Although we have had our first potentially large scale battle as the dwarves are reclaiming their ancient heritage and holds and removing the almost certain influence of Skaven and possibly chaos at its heart.
I do think I'm going to pull my first trap on y'all here in a second. But we'll get to that when we get to that. Okay, that vote has started, so go ahead and get on that real fast. Next up we have, so you know how you've talked about your alternate end time scenario. Honestly, this sounds kind of like a version of that, at least the first part, except I feel the end times version would be more with Chaos trying to subvert this plan. I could see Mazdamundi versus Kairos on behalf of Tzeentch as big manipulators in this great scheme. Oh yeah. Yeah,
agreed. And just because we've started off with what appears to be relative successes doesn't mean we're about to. Well, it doesn't mean we're not about to hit a lot of significant potential failures.
Yep. Ricky Chapman, they tell Valet to wake up and get back to work.
Get back to work, yeah, pretty much.
Where you been, woman? Sephifer, how do we rectify the divisions with the elves and dwarves? Who says that we do? But specifically with Gromberdal and Malekith. Once again, who says we do?
Yeah, agreed. A reconciliation is not a required part of the Great Plan. What is required in the Great Plan is they do their frickin' job, which means that the elves are tending Ulthuan and the dwarves are tending the spine of the world.
Yeah, if anything, the lizardmen probably just wouldn't want them interacting.
Yeah. Because the lizardmen in this are not good guys.
Yeah, no.
They are responsible for the death at this point already. We're talking potentially months in as we're moving to the first few years of this supposed campaign, but they're going to be responsible for the death of millions of what many people would view as good guys.
Yep. And Aaron Streever, an idea Mazda could send a message to Grimnir saying to go home, and he says no, and Mazda can't unseat him. Yeah, it's not,
there's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
I think this is enormously likely. Now,
that would be such a cool like sidebar scene.
If that is the case, though, Mazdamundi wouldn't ask him. Because you've got to realize that you're dealing with someone who understands the threads of fate. He will simply look up and he will see that that is an immovable object. He can't influence it, so wouldn't even try. Try to get into the slightly more 4D version of how Mazdamundi and the Great Croaking Chorus think. And they think ahead of what this particular thought is. The answer is absolutely certain. Grimnir would never, ever leave. And that means Grimnir, in some respects, is lost to his own corruption, but equally is staving off corruption because he's holding a fricking Chaos Gate. So he's doing his job. But the resolution of this is probably going to be a bit different to, say, the Slayer books.
Yeah, I actually think the scene that you would see on this on like your little sidebar would be almost like when Grugni is freed from the Glittering Realm. Him talking about Mazdamundi and saying, "Send my brother back," and Mazdamundi saying, "It's not time."
Yeah, this is not the time.
Yeah, he cannot leave. It's not time.
Absolutely. I think that'd be a good way of handling it. Deal with it from the outside, because Grimnir's not coming home.
Yeah, Uplight 8, with dwarves holding mountains and might be funneling greenskins into areas like Darklands serves as grinders against forces Chaos Wars. So, we're about to, in the moment that y'all pick your race here, I'm going to talk about the consequences a little bit of the decision y'all just made, because there are going to be some consequences. Because the forces, the other forces of the world will not sit idle, so to speak. Hendrik Verbeek, what if the Black Orcs were a successful experiment? So if they had been like what the Chaos Wars wanted them to be.
Yeah, I think that's really quite close to the question we were discussing earlier in the other super chat. And
yeah, I think he's trying to replace it.
Yeah, that's almost it. Because they are wholly successful, in many respects, too successful. So in some respects, your question is, what if the Black Orcs weren't as capable?
Yeah.
What if the Chaos Dwarves weren't as good at their job and had created a species that was actually subservient and capable of controlling the other greenskins?
Laughing God, what if the Tomb Kings had been able to return to life?
And their golden bodies.
Yeah, what if Hierophant Kotep had succeeded? Yeah, that would be a really fun one.
That would be an interesting one, particularly that ultimately means, what if we gotten the heck back?
Yeah. What if Cetra wasn't a megalomaniac obsessed with immortality? Well, he just wouldn't be Cetra.
Yeah, quite. Yeah, you'd need to build. See, what if like that? What you're looking for is, what is the event? What changes? Okay, so what makes Cetra not that? Not just Cetra isn't this. We have to say why he isn't that.
Yeah. This one's kind of fun. Hendrik, what if Karl Franz had married Emanuel von Leibowitz when they were young?
Yeah, it's a common what if that many people think of, primarily because that would marry the center of the empire to the south and create an enormous power base. The question is, would it make much of a difference in the overall politics of the empire?
Mazdamundi declares, a thinking brain halfling for every ogre. Would Morgur go after the silver flame of Ulrich? You bet your ass he would.
Damn freaking straight he would.
Yeah, I bet he has in his history, and it unfortunately did not go well for him.
Yeah.
What if Greases had captured the last Sky Titan? Oh, the Sky Titan that escaped. Ooh, I think that's before Greases' time, but there is an interesting discussion there. What
if a Sky Titan came down from the heavens?
Yeah, I actually think that would probably be a better way to twist it. Is what if the last Sky Titan returned? Because he had his castle in the sky thing.
Yeah, there could be something really cool in that.
What would happen with Gotrek and Felix? Honestly, they'd probably be off doing Gotrek and Felix things. Those two are very much pawns of fate, as much as they hate to be it. So they would likely be kind of just caught up in things happening. But who's to say? Maybe they get caught up with like the dwarves going to reclaim some hold, and Gotrek being like, "This will be a mighty doom," and getting caught up in reclaiming who knows what. But don't worry, shit's about to hit the fan. So y'all have finished your vote, and it was actually very close on both between Grand Cathay and the humans, but ultimately Grand Cathay has claimed victory. However, I would like to propose that there's a consequence because of y'all's decision, because y'all are playing politics too much, and Mazdamundi is not focusing enough on the enemy. So the dwarves have unleashed the Age of Vengeance. They are attacking the holds, And by doing so, there are going to be two primary threats that are triggered hard by this, which are the Greenskins and the Skaven. The Skaven are under attack, and the Greenskins are being pushed out of their strongholds and are starting to realize that a big fight is on. So Greenskins are going to start flooding in from the south and the east towards the Karazhan, and the Skaven are realizing that something is going on.
Yeah, this is where the Horned Rat steps in. Quite literally, the Horned Rat. The threat to the Horned Rat's entire species is clear. Then at this point, it's obvious that the children of the Old Ones intend to exterminate the Skaven, which means that they're not going to take this sitting down. And it's going to cause some immediate retaliation, but beyond that, also some immediate decisions will need to be made. Because if we are dealing with the Slann at potentially almost their full capability, what used to be safe no longer will be. Because there's one thing the Slann can do in a fashion that is terrifying to a species that lives underground: they can bring it down. They can flood all the undersea tunnels. They can literally just throw light magic into the tunnel systems and cause them all to come crushing down because they know where they are. Which means that we are going to get a very unexpected outcome for the Skaven. They're coming up.
Yep. So, EG cruising, yes. Once y'all begin extermination, you're not locked into it. There are branching paths here, so don't worry about like, oh no, we're stuck. But because we've been focused so much on diplomacy, I would say this will have the effect of the dwarfs. They have the ancestor gods with them, which allows them to even do what they're doing without it just blowing up in their face. But they are in an ugly situation where even with the support of the lizardmen, the Greenskins are now striking back against them hard. And the Skaven are on the move. The Vermin Lords are on the move.
Yeah. And the Council of 13 will be moving in concert with the Horned Rat, because the Horned Rat, something that it's fair to say about that particular deity, when it's threatened and it's put in a corner, it attacks. And it's quite willing to literally throw all of its children away to win. So we are going to see rats rising up out of the system everywhere, and I do mean everywhere.
Yeah, I think this would trigger
threatened.
I think I would feel safe saying that this would trigger the first uprising. So Talea, Estalia, the Empire, Bretonia in a shitload of trouble because there are now Skaven popping up everywhere. The Southlands comes under attack, and the Lizardmen are actually fighting full on now. The dwarves are under a lot of attack, but they're also armed with better tools than they had initially, and the lizardmen are helping them. So situation's a bit messy now.
I would suggest that there is going to be a certain amount of containment from the lizardmen from this. They're fully aware of what's coming, and they'll be preparing. So I would suggest that most of the tunnels that are sitting underneath the Great Ocean are going to be closed. They're going to be flooded. Clan Pestilence over in Lustria is really in trouble.
Clan Pestilence is having a bad time.
In fact, Clan Pestilence of all the clans is in the biggest trouble. It's arguably one of the most powerful, but in this scenario, they're in the Lizardman center. And unlike the End Times version, in this version, the Lizardmen are cohesive, working together, prepared, and collapsing tunnels everywhere. Skaven are dying by their millions in the south. But if we move up to the north, it's a completely different kettle of fish, because the power center of Skavenblight and then the power center of Clan Eshin over in the east, they will be rising up, and they'll be going very much for the we shall inherit version, which is all of the cities above are ours, which means that they're going to be bubbling up.
Does actually make this a little interesting, because this means the Skaven are uprising in Grand Cathay now.
Yeah.
So Grand Cathay already has a problem when the Slann finally turned their attention to the Dragon Emperor. And this is a very unique entity compared to everything else, because this is an entity who is older than them, who spoke to the Old Ones, which none of them did. The Celestial Dragon Emperor is the only time in this entire scenario where the Slann are going to be directly communicating with an entity that is genuinely, unfathomably older and may know more than they do.
Yeah. So this is the big one, and it's a decision that needs to be made, and that is this dragon part of the great plan? And the question needs to be answered to determine how to deal with all of this, particularly if Mazdamundi is of the opinion that, say, for example, he isn't, which means extermination. Or the flip side, yes, he is. The old ones had already come to accept them and what they did, and Grand Cathay as a whole is a part of the Great Plan as they now perceive it. We have a very clear one side or the other decision here, and both of them take very different stories as we move towards the end. On one side, we have all-out war. On the other side, we have something else. And that all-out war doesn't necessarily mean the Lizardmen go to war with Cathay. It could be the Lizardmen drive the Greenskins into Cathay. It could be Chaos is funneled into Cathay so that they deal with that while the Lizardmen consolidate other borders. Remember, they're dealing with all of the threads of fate at once, so they can play at it. So that's is that a decision we should leave to everyone else?
Yep, I already put it up. Is the Dragon Emperor and his plans and what's going on in Grand Cathay part of the Great Plan?
Yeah. Emperor, dragons.
Yeah, I don't have enough text to put this, but by Mazdamundi's estimation should be the final bit of that.
Yeah, quite. Does the Great Plan include Cathay or does it not?
Yep.
Ooh, that's quite a fun one.
Zylok, what if the Dragon Emperor had united all of humanity? He'd have a big old empire. Though that actually would have been interesting because that would have meant that he would have needed to go up into the Eastern Steppes. So his empire would have stretched much because that's where all those tribes came from in the old world.
Yeah, we would be looking at him bounding the north and the south if you take a look at what happens down in Nehekara. So basically, Nehekara gets taken over by the dragons. There's something in that too.
Yeah, I put down the list that there's something interesting there. The giants are going to be forced home by the Slann. The giants would be a very tragic case. Because I don't think you're wrong in that they would want them to return to where the Sky Titans came from, but it also they are so horribly corrupt from what they were meant to be. I think Mazdamundi would probably
be like two of them left at the end.
Yeah, I think
Kill the giants.
Yeah, I think Mazdamundi would probably wipe out the giants because of just how horribly degenerate they are from what they're meant to be. There might be like a small handful of like the really ancient bone grinder giants that they're like, those are close. But I think the giants would probably face mass extinction.
Yep.
Which would be really sad because it's through no fault of their own. It's literally because of them being attacked by other species. Andrea, sorry for the off top. Why does Hish control stone instead of Azir?
It doesn't. It zips through stone and causes earthquakes.
Yeah, don't think of it as you're manipulating the stone. A lot of geomancy is working with unbinding, or like imagine taking a material and grabbing the fundamental etheric thread that binds it together and pulling, which unbinds everything: constructs, metal, earth, stone. Like it's bonkers. It's just scary. It's a very, very scary lore of magic.
Really is.
Captain Magma, might suggest the Skaven make a deal with Chaos and even the Greenskins early on in the scenario. The Skaven are about to do something, don't worry. Like this could be a huge unholy alliance to Bruce. Greenskins don't really do alliances. They just fight. They fight, and it may look like they're allying with certain factions, but they're just there to fight. They don't give a damn. They never have, and they never will. Now, there might be some enterprising individuals like Skarsnik, who is very clever and sees the writing on the wall and says, ooh, I need to try and team up with the Skaven against all this dwarf nonsense. That is very likely. Merrick Apex is going to be a hellhole.
And the Skaven also have another issue as well, which is that Chaos ultimately want to destroy everything that the Skaven are too. So Chaos make a very poor ally for all they do, ally with them frequently, according to the circumstances at hand, but they also backstab and betray.
Yeah, the Skaven are going to pull some shenanigans in this stream, don't you worry, because we're going to be using the Skaven as we should, which is a very unreliable force that are always trying to get out themselves on top. Mazda and the rulers just go to Thruples counseling. The money doesn't need counseling. The Dragon Emperor talked to the old ones and lived, so yes. I mean, that's a way you can look at it. That's a fair interpretation. Donoman, so while the Lizardmen wouldn't immediately strike Skaven Blight when they start pouring up from their under empire, would be a great opportunity to strike them from behind so the Slung could collapse their major Skaven fortresses. Maybe that could be something that happens depending on y'all's votes. Baron von Bastard, Mazdamundi, sing the Skaven incursion. Release the fanatic! Asaurus takes a frothing Tehinoan out of his baby harness. Throw him. Donoman, so what if the Dragon Emperor was part of the Great Plan, but the Dragon Emperor's plan and or his kids weren't? Well, the thing that the Dragon Emperor has is a huge advantage, which we'll talk about depending on y'all's vote, is Mazdamundi doesn't know. The Dragon Emperor may be able to convince Mazdamundi in their discussions that I am part of the Great Plan, yada yada, but that doesn't mean the Dragon Emperor is going to be like, oh yes, the old ones told me all this stuff, and he's being completely honest. He's going to be trying to pull his own schemes and shenanigans. I mean, he's a clever son of a bitch. Speaking of which, we have reached the end of this poll, and the chat has voted pretty strongly. About 66% yes. So yes, Mazdamundi declares the Dragon Emperor is part of the Great Plan.
Right then, so he doesn't need to do anything.
Yep, he literally just leaves them alone.
Yep. Which means that we don't need to have any great diplomacy or meetings of minds or any of that business at all. All it requires is ensuring that they, along their particular strands of fate, are properly shored up against all the potential fighting that is to come, of which there's a lot, but at the same point, the entirety of Cathay is, in many respects, very defensible, with mountains on one side, a wall on another, great warpstone deserts on that side, sea on the other side. It is in a very good block, which means it's very defensible. And as the Skaven are bubbling up, or perhaps Greenskins coming down over from the west, they're going to be in a position where they are quite strong, truth be told.
Also, just wanted to answer this because it's an interesting question. Goat Forceman Goat. What about the Moon Empress? Surely she could not be part of the planet. She's an off-world. The Great Plan encompasses the solar system, not
all
just
of
the
it.
planet.
All of the planets in the solar system were put in place by the old ones into their current orbit. So, yeah, all of it is part of the Great Plan.
It's not just part of the Great Plan. It's a very big plan.
Yeah, totally.
It is great.
I have no issue with her being a part of the Great Plan.
Yeah, Charlie Turtle, just very curious what he thinks of the humans in Cathay. I think at this point, with the way y'all have voted, he would see them as tools of the Dragon Emperor.
Everyone is a tool in respect to exactly what they do, including the Dragon Emperor.
Yeah, they are being implemented as they were meant to be. Therefore, no involvement is required.
So that means that, loosely speaking, according to this version, we've got at least 3 separate spawning points for humanity. One probably being in the Southlands, one probably being Old World, one probably being Cathay or around that area.
Yep. All right, so I'm going to get the next poll started really, really fast. And for what happens next, because Cathay, like we said, we'll just leave them to it. They're dealing with the uprising of Clan Eshin. Chaos at this point is likely becoming far more active and starting to attack the Great Bastion. Greenskins are flooding in from fucking everywhere because Greenskins can sense something's up. All right. So what's next? Do we begin extermination? Do we
halflings?
We still have humans to do as well. So talk
humans
to another race.
Oh yeah.
And while y'all are voting on this, as y'all are voting on this, I'm gonna run to the restroom very, very briefly because I'm gonna explode if I don't, and I would rather not do that.
That would certainly change the tone of the stream.
Yes, it would. Okay, so let's see. No, how do I? There we go. No, stop. There we go. Okay, I will be right back. Well, Andy, I don't just grab random comments or something.
I'm just going to sit here dancing in my pink headphones. Do we have any more comment? We got one there from Syke. Hey, Syke. The Skaven and Greenskins are good tools for Mazda in the Great Resetting. While a lot of people will die, empires will fall. But in the end, it would be easier to deal with the Skaven Greenskins being in a single place. The problem with that reasoning is that the Skaven and Greenskins don't care. And yes to all of that. In general, the Skaven and the Greenskins are not part of the plan, but they can be used to help reset the plan. As in, if there is a great uprising of Skaven in one area, it can be used to drive people back to where they should be, according to Mazdamundi's view of the overall plan's outcome. So yeah, I completely agree. And I also agree that they are deeply, deeply unpredictable. The Skaven, for very obvious reasons. Both unpredictable in terms of what they will do, and the god that they're tied to, but also unpredictable because they might just blow up and kill themselves. The Greenskins equally are almost the opposite, very predictable. They're going to fight, and they're going to fight wherever you find them. And that, in some respects, makes them almost a better tool of the old ones than almost anything else. In some respects, you might even argue they were always an intended part of the plan. Although we know for a fact that they are frequently said as not being part of the plan. But they are super easy to manipulate if you know what you're doing.
Yeah, and there would be a lot of fascinating stuff going on of the Slann trying to manipulate the Greenskin, but so would, of course, other forces. A lot of people trying to honestly probably avoid fighting them, but wielding them against their enemies, and them being a very unreliable tool.
And one of the worst parts of using greenskins is that the more they're used, the harder they get. Which means that this tool is getting tempered and quickly turning into something that is perhaps unwieldy, too big, and then suddenly what was once a useful thing to herd your plan into place becomes something that doesn't just bite back at your hand, it takes off your entire arm. So yeah, the greenskins may be very easy to manipulate, but they're also exceedingly dangerous should you succeed in manipulating them and they don't die.
Yeah, greenskins can become they're like any good infestation. You don't want them getting out of control.
The big green disease.
Ricky Chapman, what if Vlad von Karstein had won? Yep, that's an easy what if. As far as like branching off and discussing what could happen is if he had taken Altdorf. And Captain Magma, when talking to humans, are Tomb Kings included? The undead will fall probably under the extermination banner. They are not
to deal with the gash at some point.
Yes,
and
we
the
will.
Tomb Kings and the vampires.
Okay, so extermination won by a good bit. In the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and get the next poll up and running. So who are we going to focus the extermination against? Who to
Skaven, undead, chaos, chaos dwarves. That's kind of in the same area.
I would probably say, let's say chaos dwarfs, undead,
greenskins. There's quite a few options.
Skaven. Oh yeah, you know what? Let's just do chaos and include chaos dwarfs in that because I only have 4. So chaos, undead, Skaven, greenskins. I think will be our initial wave. Who, in y'all's opinion, I have strong opinions on this one, but I'm going to let the people decide. Who should be the first? How do I? Okay, that poll's almost done. That's fine. All right, so that poll's up. Laughing God, that would be a fun what if. What if Grom and or Gorbad had returned, as they are not confirmed dead? Yeah, that would be a really, really fun one of the return of those. I was actually talking
in particular. Grom is scary. Grom's not even that long ago.
Yeah, Grom. Yeah, he's only.
I mean, we have a pretty. We sort of covered that. Which stream was it? Was it the Grom stream?
Yeah, it was the Grom stream. Actually,
it was the Grom stream. But there's a very clear, obvious place for him to land afterwards, and it's quite clear that particular goblin almost certainly should have become part of the end times. I think.
Yep. Yeah, Gorbad would also be very interesting. We had someone on a stream I did the other day that asked, like, if I wanted to do the Beast Rises 40k series, but in fantasy, who should I use as a big bad? I said, use Gorbad. If he survived and came back after 700 years, he would be huge. Like, if he was still around after 700 years, that would be a big, scary fucking orc. But, all right, so I'm going to also pop this question into the Twitch chat real quick, and I'm going to give you all a little bit less time, but that's okay. Y'all are big boys and girls. You can handle it. Okay, we got that going here. Okay, go vote. The Astro Compass and Geomantic Web integrated. I don't think the Slum would care that much about the compass. The whooshing compass. It's a very important thing. Go watch our streams on Grand Cathay. We've done a good couple of them, especially the one we did on the capital city itself. We talk a lot about it and why it's really important and really cool, but for the Slaawn, I don't think they would worry about that.
We forgot to mention Beastmen. We picked that up with the Chaos.
Chaos, I would include Beastmen.
Yeah, totally. They are the children of Chaos after all.
Yes, indeedy. Dynaman, what if Gromswa and Tarmokon's invasion happened at the same time? Bad. It would be bad. I mean, if
they're quite distant from each other in time, like by about 100 years, but still.
Yeah. The answer is very, very bad, unless maybe, luckily for everyone, they like run into each other.
They probably would. And out of the two, I think Grom would win.
Yeah, I agree. It would have been
by some significant measure.
Yeah, and it still would have been really bad because then you would have had greenskins that got hardened up in a war against Chaos coming into the Empire, which would have been even worse.
It would be bad. Yeah, it'd be bad.
Chapter Graham, what is gnomes in this scenario? What if the gnomes in this scenario end up being Mazdamundi's diplomats, spies, saboteurs, and assassins? Sneaky Olgu malarkey.
Yeah, almost certainly the case.
The ogres. Oh yeah, because I mean, who knows? Maybe this was their purpose that the gods gave to them. And they're like, the time has come.
And everything that you're discussing there, Chapter Grim, is largely what the different clans do anyway. Some of them are magical guards, some are magical assassins, some of them are traders and diplomats going from place to place to place. The Grey Wind very much infuses them and gives them that wanderlust to go from one area to the next. But also, like Grey Wizards, it does bring a certain level of wisdom. So yes, I think that is a very good way of resolving that.
Votes are in, and by overwhelming majority, the Lizardmen have decided to... Mazdamundi says the time for the first stage of extermination has come, and we must strike the children of the horned rat.
Yeah, it's the obvious one. Yeah, not a surprise. Definitely given that the Skaven are rising up across the world, they shall inherit, and part of that rise up is because of the terror of what is to come, because their underground passageways are already beginning to collapse, be flooded. It's causing issues. We already know that Clan Pestilence in this scenario is in bad shape, although Clan Eshin, arguably a better one, and then Skaven Blight itself to the north is massively fortifying itself for the potential worst that's about to come.
Yeah, and we do have, we can use the fun parts of the end time stuff where we have the Vermin Lords are now showing up in unprecedented numbers. Yeah. Clan Mulder and Clan Scryer have finished their masterpiece being the Storm Fiends. So a new level of technological achievement has arrived. So the Skaven are very scary. But to take us into this next segment, I have another quote that I want to read that's super duper fun about how could the Lizardmen initiate this war in a way that is stupidly over the top to go along with this stream. And the answer is that in the timeline of 8th edition, in 2502 of the Imperial calendar, a mere 20 years ago, we get the quote, "It is foreseen that a device being built by the Skaven in their lair of Slagmire must not be completed. Tehenwin is chosen to lead the assault, and the Slaawn use magic to transport the Prophet of Sotek and his army into the Skaven den. A 3-year battle breaks out, which leads to the eventual defeat of the Skaven and the destruction of their rocket invention." Which you may note, this is literally the Slaawn foreseeing the Skaven plot to blow up the moon and stopping it.
Yep. That's exactly what it is. I was always a little bit disappointed with some of the end times steps that were taken, because many of the things that the Skaven were doing had already been loosely hinted at in other books and stopped. Because the Lizardmen are the Lizardmen. It's what they do. They are defenders of the entire planet. And the pulling the moon down from the heavens, if it could potentially be successful, would have been, broadly speaking, stopped already. And I think that we're in a position where we have ourselves very obvious seers who are capable of perceiving the worst that the Skaven are capable of doing. But we also have Skaven who are very good at hiding what they do. And we are in a position where the Skaven have been effectively working a shadow war for the last 20 years leading up to Mazdamundi's great purge. And the last 20 years, they have been trying to do a whole host of crazy stuff, and lizardmen have been attacking here and there. Tehenowin, a 3-year war in one of the key places all over the world. It's not just this one place, this other place. It's happening everywhere. And as the Skaven are rising up, we now have to decide how exactly do the lizardmen cope with this. Do they deal with it directly? Do they work with all of their ally species? If they're going with the let's follow the great plan, that means humanity is largely responsible for holding back the Skaven threat in the old world, because the dwarves are going to be pushing them out of the mountains. And if they're rising up in the cities, then it's humanity's job to deal with that. And humanity is yet to be properly primed, because you didn't choose that, which means we are in potentially a very bad place. Humanity, which should have been shored up by this point, has not been, which means that the Skaven, when they're getting tackled by the lizardmen, arguably a little bit late, are already going to be in a place where, outside of, let's say, Cathay and perhaps other parts of the east, the Skaven are probably winning in the old world. Does that seem fair to you?
Yeah, I would actually say at this point, the old world, I think, would be a trash fire. Yeah. I think Archaon's invasion will have begun because he's not ignorant to what's going on in the world. Yeah. While Ulthuan is busy defending itself from the legions of chaos coming
with
down
their
across
gods.
Yeah, right. Their gods are with them. But
yeah.
we also have chaos.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah, chaos is going to be... Now, the good thing for the lizardmen is I think chaos itself, so like the warriors of chaos and their armadas and the demons, are going to be very heavily focused on Ulthuan. That is because they want to destroy the
war. I think they're not, because they want to win. They want to win, and that means that they take where it's weak, and it's weak in the old world. And we know how important Middenheim is. Yeah, Middenheim is important. So because of the timeline we've got, obviously there would be assaults all over the place. Nikari is not going to stop. The Nagaroth is going to be assaulted also. But if we're looking at where Archaon's interested, he's going to go for that same classic center, which is Middenheim. And I would suggest by this point of the timeline that the vast majority of the Empire and the old world as a whole is on fire. It is, as you say, one gigantic trash heap, which is burning. The Skaven have risen up in more places than anyone's really properly ready for. The elves are no longer protecting the Bretonnians. The Lady of the Lake is gone. The Bretonnians are left to deal with this by themselves, and they're doing it badly. The lizardmen are dealing with other matters, shoring things up with the dwarves and elsewhere. The Cathayans are perhaps holding off relatively well. They have a giant wall. There is no giant wall on the other side. Kislev is largely sacked, perhaps only Kislev city itself standing strong with spirits and
I would say Prague's definitely gone by now.
Yeah, Prague's gone, Erengrad's gone. We might have a few parts of the Empire still half standing, but I would suggest that maybe even Middenheim, possibly only Middenheim, is the any real population centre that's still standing in the Empire, which is a bad place.
I think I would say like some of the cities that have been built, because I think the undead, because they also have been dealt with, would be helping against chaos. Oh, yeah. You would have the vampires assisting. So I think places like Averheim,
Sylvania could most likely to still be largely in place. Skaven have never had much of an undermining there, which means...
Typical vampires coming in for the save against the Skaven.
Yeah, totally. So it wouldn't surprise me if the vampires are holding a lot. The Empire would be a very different place. There's going to be howling and screaming and peasants being fed upon and chaos coming in from the north and the vampires holding off against it, raising up all the dead of the Empire from underneath the Skaven's feet to turn into their own servants to push forward. Yeah, there's a bit of a mess in the Empire, I think.
Yes. So the question is, how are the Skaven dealt with? And this is where, of course, everybody's favorite genocidal maniac, Tehenowin, I think, really comes into play. Of that, the War of the Serpent and the Rat reaches its zenith. Because Tehenowin's a very unique character in that he doesn't really care as much about like the full focus of the Great Plan, but has this really obsessive, detailed focus with the Great Horned Rat being devoured by Sotek to be digested for 10,000 years, whatever the hell it is. And I think we would see the culmination of that war, of Tehenowin fully leading a significant chunk of the armies of the Lizardmen and their most dangerous weapons against the Skaven, likely striking into Skaven Blight itself, and probably being one of the most titanic. Like, if you were going to have your big 2-page spread battle scene for this part of the storyline, this would be your big 2-page spread battle of the fight of Skaven Blight. Which, of course, the big thing is that because this is Mazdamundi and the Slum being fully unleashed, there is one big fucking problem the Skaven have, and that's Mazdamundi unleashing the ruination of cities and cutting off the tunnels.
Yeah, it's why they have to come up. And the Horned Rat will be ready for this. The Horned Rat has sent them up already. And it is a move of desperation, because we all know the Skaven, for all they've got these great myths of one day inheriting the earth and being the ones who are in control, it's not their natural place. So coming up is never going to be their first choice. But Skaven Blight is above ground. Huge chunks of it are above ground. So this is going to be a proper epic battle. And I think our first real battle where the outcome of whether there is going to be a success for Mazdamundi or not is going to be determined. And in this particular case, given that we've got a Mazdamundi who is heading towards being able to take out potentially the invading Chaos Horde, then I would say the Skaven are going to have to be a road bump, or he's going to fail.
Yep, and I'm going to let chat decide that, because so we get what would probably be known as either the Siege of Skaven Blight or the Great Battle of the Blighted Marshes.
Mm-hmm.
Which, granted, to the Lizardman's credit, or to Hinwin especially, he is going to probably fare a bit better in a very soggy aquatic environment of the marshes, but it's also nasty. The Blighted Marshes suck.
It is. Having said that, though, we've got proper artifacts of the old ones going off against proper... The Skaven war machines are untrustworthy. Really, really untrustworthy. Some of them are going to blow up in their own faces.
There will be betrayals among the Skaven.
Yeah,
there will be Skaven that see this as the perfect opportunity to kill their rivals.
I can see something really unexpected and horrendous, like, for example, a literal sky laser from the heavens beaming down and just blowing it up, with the lizardmen on all sides, ensuring that the Skaven can't escape. So the actual battle for Skaven Blight isn't going to be a battle for Skaven Blight. It's going to be a battle to escape Skaven Blight, as one of the most important, powerful weapons of the old ones is unleashed directly onto the center of that city.
Yeah, because this would be for Tehinwin, somewhat ironically, this would be the attempt to cut the head of the snake.
Yeah,
kill the Council 13.
What I particularly like as well is that this is perhaps speaking to why the Skaven keep on going up and trying to pull shit down. What they're actually doing is misunderstanding the Hornrat's desire to destroy the great threats to Skaven Blight. And perhaps it's literally on Mansleep or something similar to that, and it fires down a great artifact that has been lost from ages past. All the pieces that have been collected for it over the last so many centuries are put together, and it is unleashed from the heavens, and it nukes with a giant space laser Skaven Blight from above, and the Skaven are flooding out of there at a pace, and the army is besieging on all sides, ready to take on whatever the Skaven can throw at them.
The Stangle would definitely survive. Of course he would.
He definitely would.
Stangle would absolutely survive. He'd probably end up killing one of the Council of 13 that was about to rally the battle, and Stangle kills him and escapes.
It's almost certain. And I think that if, assuming you go for something like this, the real question is, do the Skaven escape here, or do the Lizardmen successfully pen them in? And if they are successfully penned in, then we have problems for Mazdamundi's great plan. If they are not penned in and he slaughters them, then we are on the first step towards the Skaven. They've just had their head cut off, being in real trouble.
So, chat over, and for anyone out there that's like, man, this is kind of power stuff. We're exploring a really crazy power fantasy. And don't worry, your favorite race will get one of these episodes too at some point. Yeah. So, chat overwhelmingly, like 85% voted the Skaven lose horribly.
Ooh, horror. So, I'm going to suggest that if the Skaven had worked together, then they would have been able to.
Oh yeah, the Skaven would definitely bring about their own.
Do a big giant anti-sky beam warpstone piece of nonsense, but they are going to betray themselves. Stanquil probably pulls the whole thing down so that the Grey-Seer Council it becomes his, as he then moves off, and all of the Grey-Seers that were trying to stop what was going to happen to Skaven Blight are killed. And he gets out, and he probably moves up into somewhere like Talabheim, because Talabheim is fated to fall to the Skaven if you go with any of the roleplay books. So
he'll go have his final battle with Gotrek and Felix.
Yeah, totally. Up in Talabheim. Or Nuln, because Nuln has got history. But I would suggest Talabheim for a different background. So we have the eradication of Skaven Blight, the only proper battle that the Lizardmen are keen to involve themselves with. They have limited troops, and they realize that this is only one part of the far bigger whole. They are here to cut off the head to ensure that all the other battles elsewhere become easier, so that the Cathaeans, when they're rising up, will have hopefully much easier battle against Clan Eshin. Up in the north, Kislev and what remains of it will be able to deal with Clan Moldar, and so on and so forth elsewhere. Their heads have been cut off, and now it's just lots of individual groups of Skaven panicking as the Lizardmen, well, the Slan, are unleashing spell after earthquake spell after earthquake spell down through the land. The mountains themselves are shifting, and all of the tunnels are collapsing. And by this point, the Skaven are screwed. They have been losing their numbers in their, now this might sound ridiculous, but billions, because there are so many Skaven beneath the earth.
Quote the end times, 1 billion times 1 billion.
Yeah, quite. It is quite, the number of Skaven dying in this assault it's enormous. Skaven Blight is the heart of it, but in truth, the real battle is the Slan Mage Priest Chorus, who are flooding the mountains, much as they did more than once in the past, flooding the mountains with all of their Heish magic in particular, and high magic, and sinking all of those tunnels. It's the tunnels they're after, and it's why the Karakankor can't stand as it did. It's why the dwarves have to withdraw down to the only safe space they can be with their ancestor gods. Many of them have, some of them have stubbornly stayed, and they are massacred as the holes collapse.
Yeah, this would be the death of pretty much, I think, all of the dwarf holds in the non-World's Edge mountain ranges. So like the Black Mountains, the Vaults, the Grey Mountains, because unfortunately, as we all know, there are literally Skaven under all of these places. There are Skaven all around them, and the Slann would be indiscriminate.
Yeah, absolutely.
They would say, oh no, we're not going to mess with the World's Edge because those dwarves are winning the fight. They've got their ancestor gods with them. They're doing what they're supposed to do. But the rest of these guys, dead.
Indiscriminate and also surgical. They're going to bring it all down, but it's going to be very tightly controlled because they understand, as we said right at the beginning of the stream, where all the Under Empire is. They know. And they are going to be basically sending a gigantic magic scalpel through all of it to crash it down and to flood it. It's going to be awful.
Yeah, so
absolutely awful.
We have the Skaven quite thoroughly ultimately crushed. Oh, that's actually a good point. Yeah, there would be a couple of human cities that would suffer badly, like Altdorf. If Altdorf was still standing, Altdorf would fall, because Altdorf is the biggest undercity.
And the Skaven have been coming up from beneath these cities, and many of them are getting crushed as some of these cities begin to fall. This is not a good time to be out and about anywhere where the Skaven have undermined.
Yeah, congrats, chat. You may have just finished off the old world.
The old world is in trouble. By this point. And it's going to be very good for the Chaos forces that are making their way down towards this area.
Yeah. So with that, we're on to the next stage. As
Holy
we
crap,
try
this is bad.
Keep things moving.
I love it.
Yeah, some places in the world are looking pretty okay, but a lot of your most famous locations are not so much.
Wow.
Yeah, more extermination. What's interesting is that whole scenario is actually not that crazy lore-wise if they use the Slann to their full potential. Of like the Slann, they literally let Thanquil go in the Thanquil series, and we get to see the Slann's eternal thoughts. If he just looks at Thanquil's destiny and says he's going to do more damage to the Skaven than I ever could, and lets him go. Of that, the extermination of Skaven Blight would literally be, and the surgical strikes would be ignoring specific Skaven or specific clans that are just going to cause more problems with the Skaven. Like the Skaven Under Empire is going to get the Slaughter are one of the absolute best gear to deal with the Skaven.
Yeah, I would suggest this is the point when the Horned Rat withdraws the Skaven from the Warhammer world.
Yeah, picks up his followers and pulls them into the realm of ruin.
And pulls them down into the equivalent of their Under Empire in the Aether, so that the Skaven survive. And whichever ones are left there, of which there will be countless millions, even after so many billions have died, they're just going to be left to their own devices. The Horned Rat and all of the Vermin Lords have gone. They're moving on to the next place.
Yep, and we would have had plenty of gigantic, ridiculous, epic battles. All sorts of fun things of like good old like Vermin Lords and some of the characters would have had there would have been horrific death. I mean, you would have had Tehinuin out there fighting alongside the likes of like Krokgar and Gorok and stuff, facing off against the Council of 13, and the Lords of Decay would have a horrible kill count before they're brought down. Lords of Decay are not a fucking joke.
They are going to be a nice battle.
Yeah, a lot of lizardmen would die. This would probably be the costliest fight we've had in our scenario
Massively so. Yes, definitely. And lizardmen will have been teleported from around the world to support this one because it's a massive, massive area that they need to ring, which means we're talking potentially hundreds of thousands of lizardmen here, staving off against millions of Skaven that are pushing out. It's a big thing.
Yeah, and it's interesting of like Tehinuin in many ways fulfilling his purpose. Though granted, Sotek is not just against the Skaven; he's against chaos as well.
I can always imagine the Sotek ringing around the place like an eternal snake.
Yeah, it just looks
in fact, it wouldn't surprise me if they'd call it the Ring of Sotek. Okay, that they've managed to spread all around it with the snake eating its own tail to keep the Skaven on the inside.
Oh yeah, well, you could almost imagine like if you had looked from above, Tehinuin's tactics would have looked like certain formations of the Lizardman army striking like a snake's head at part of the Skaven army.
Yeah.
And who knows? Maybe the battle would have ended like the OG crazy one did, where you have the big epic finale of Screech Vermin King and a manifestation of Sotek shows up and eats him. Just for funsies.
There can be all manner of crazy bullshit going on. Love it.
All right. Chat has voted for, we want to, okay, this is the first time YouTube and Twitch was divided, but YouTube had a much heavier lean. So we're talking to another younger race. All right, the only options left are ogres and humanity.
Let's do a quick vote on that.
Which, interestingly, both of them, the ogres would be doing better than humanity, but ogres would still be it'd be busy.
Well, they're having a time.
Yeah, they're having a time.
Going
chaos
down, the ogre's gonna have themselves a time.
Because they're gonna be dealing with a lot of chaos, a lot of greenskins. The chaos dwarfs are going to be getting active because they're probably being attacked by greenskins and other things. So the chaos dwarfs are likely realizing that it's time for them to do shit. Which race? But we're quickly, threads are getting thinner and thinner here, very, very fast. Ogres / halflings. And the ogres are a potentially very difficult one because obviously there is a giant issue in regards to them.
The Maw.
Yeah, who is a bit of a problem.
Oh yeah, that's not part of the plan. Nope.
This has been a very fun exercise. Okay, while y'all are voting on that real quick, I'm gonna get caught up on some super chat stuff really, really fast.
Let's dive through these.
Oh god, where were we?
I don't know.
No, we weren't. Here we go. What if Kotep succeeding was part of the plan? Unfortunately, I really, really doubt it. I doubt the Tomb Kings dying and being brought back as immortal gods would be part of the great plan as far as Islam were concerned. Chapter Grim, Nomai Assassin Slaughter. Chapter Grim, I appreciate you're really on that Nomai binge, and I appreciate that.
And you know what? I think it's quite likely the Nomi would be involved in this, very much so. Yeah, defo.
Yeah, because I mean, Tunnel Warfare, gnomes. S tier at Tunnel Warfare. They're gonna be great at that. Baron von Bester, Tehinuin finding the Uberstrike 5 and declaring them his new best friends and champions of Sotek. I like these humans. Nagash stirs. Nagash is definitely, there's a lot of death going on in the world, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
Sign of the Emperor, what if the War of Vengeance never happened? That would be a fun one if it had been averted somehow. That would be a big one. Would Archaon fight the Skaven as much as humans by this point? Archaon would be trying to deal with Clan Mulder and Hell Pit, likely mostly by avoiding it, like allowing a lot of his force. The most likely scenario is Hell Pit would get surrounded by offshoots of the Chaos Horde.
Yeah, and we're also dealing with a world now where the Horned Rat is withdrawn, which is going to lead to a lot of Skaven being very, very scared. I mean, really scared. Squirt and the Musk of Fear will be the least of their problems. They're going to be calling on the Horned Rat and hearing nothing in return. The Great Engines no longer listening the way they used to. The Rats no longer responding the way they used to. The Horned Rat has gone in this version, which means that we're probably going to get a lot of converts. Chaos.
Yeah. Interestingly, initially, the Hell Pit might have actually been one of the few saving graces for the old world of... It would have slowed chaos down a lot.
Yeah, agreed. I think in this version, it's possibly going to fall to Nurgle. Despair. Yeah,
but now
with the great monstrosities coming out of it.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Oh,
yeah.
No. So, I can see that falling to Nurgle.
Like I mentioned, cities falling to the Skaven forces weakened for battle. Yeah, so there'd be a lot of mess, especially in the old world. Captain Magma, I think rooting for the Skaven as a whole is falling and not possible without blowing the planet up, same for Greenskins. I technically disagree, but on a very thin technical level. I think 95% of the time you're correct.
Greenskins will be everywhere. It's a mess.
Yeah. Sign of the Emperor, what if Durthu had never saved the children of the Everqueen? Ooh, that would have been
It changed a lot.
Yeah,
the
elves
world would be completely different.
Yeah, the elves would be totally different.
Yep.
And Athel Lauren would also be totally different. Amadeus Arkham. I fear Mazdamundi not dealing head-on with Tzeentch for all this time is a fatal mistake. After all, Tzeentch is the greater demon, the only entity could have foreseen and prepared for the Salon's return. I respectfully disagree of that. I think if he had gone for Tzeentch too early, Tzeentch would have outplayed them.
And it also depends what the plan's outcome is supposed to be.
Yes, yeah, that's the thing is that I think a lot of y'all don't realize where me and Andy are probably going to take the story, and you're going to go what at the end, but it's it's what it is.
Yep, I can see where this one's kind of going.
Finally, Emperor, what if Magnus the Pious had died at the Battle of Kislev? I mean, it kind of would have just been the apocalypse, to be honest, but there might be a story to explore there, but I don't think it would be a very long one.
Well, someone else could have killed Azavar Kul.
Oh, that's true. We could look at it that way. Yeah, that could be interesting. Ricky Chapman.
What if, for example, Teclis had killed Azavar Kul?
That would be spicy. Ricky Chapman. What if Ikenclaw's tractor cannon ends up having a beam struggle with the orbital lizardman cannon? Yeah. The duel of sky beams. Everyone's favorite trope. Godzilla 2021. Any mentions of Krokgar, Gorok, and Nakai leading armies against someone or helping their allies like elves, Cathay, and dwarfs. So interestingly, I think Krokgar would be like Krokgar and Gorok receive orders. They are told to go places, and Mazdamundi says, "I need you here. Go here," and they go there and they fight. Nakai is a very unique situation where Nakai has some sort of weird sense where he knows where he needs to be. So Nakai would actually probably be your really fun version of like the elves fighting something or the dwarves fighting something, and Nakai just shows up and ends up helping because it's part of the plan. But he amusingly would probably be by himself, and secondly would show up, help win a fight, and disappear just as quickly. But Nakai would probably just be a very active force in the world. That would be super duper fun. But Gorok and Krokgar would be very much used as spearheads by the Lizardmen. They're two of the most competent kind of Lizardmen generals. Donovan, honestly, at this point, the Lizardmen might be like, okay with all the undead chaos, just wipe the old world completely and teleport the entire population of End over there. That's an interesting route to deal with that. Okay, so the votes are over, and it looks like we're dealing with humanity, or what's left of it.
There's not a lot left of it in the old world, but there's a shed load of them across the actual world as a whole.
Yeah, y'all played 4D chess on accident by saving the humans of Cathay, perhaps.
Indeed. So we all know that the old world is absolutely screwed in terms of mutation, corruption, and horror. Allowing them to fall is just the first step in their plan. The next step is teleporting over all the rest of the humans into a place that the Chaos Forces did not necessarily expect large numbers of humans and lizardmen to be arriving in. So we're going to have to deal with our Nipponese, our people who may be in Koresh, people who are down in Ind, people who are in any of those other places where humans may reside. The Great Plan says they should be on the other side of the World's Edge Mountains. Only the Cathaeans are allowed to stay on that side, which means we have a ton of folk who are either going to go over or are going to be exterminated by the Lizardmen.
Yeah, so this... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say one other thing. But much like we did with the elves and the dwarves, we have one strong route to moving them, and that is that they can access the correct, let's say, tipping point to get them to want to move, which will be typically through their divinities, their gods, the entities that they worship, which ultimately will be part of the plan, because gods are part of the great plan that the Lizardmen have put into place. So even though we don't know who these people are, because they are largely to be written, TBC. These are all the other entities. We do know that they definitely have cultures, religions, and ultimately all of those span back. Some cases, super ancient cultures and religions span back to the old ones. So they are ultimately as manipulatable, I suppose, as the dwarves and the elves in their own way. And it would suggest that the old world is a mess, because they allowed it to be, to bring in an external force.
This was
afterwards.
always part of the plan. Yeah, so to put it kind of into perspective of the situation you all have created, just for kind of little funsies, there are some horrific aspects of the scenario. The peoples of the old world are basically gone. They are corrupted or dead or lost. And
that's awful.
Those that will be found will likely be purged, because they'll be too far gone at this point. So as far as you understand it, the Empire, Bretonia, Astalia, and Talea have basically been massacred. And anyone that had the ability to survive is likely also going to be massacred by what they think are their saviors. And then the people from these other lands have the Lizardmen approach them, and although there will be many that will willingly do this due to what Andy spoke about a bit ago, there will also be many that won't want to make the journey because of stubbornness or because they've put down such strong roots.
I mean, we're going to be getting the south of the Warhammer world being attacked by Chaos also. So we're going to be having all manner of horrors coming up to the south of Ind and pushing their way north. It's not just pressure from the north, there's pressure from the south as well. If we just run with, say, the End Times version, we're going to have Arbal the Undefeated running around down there, doing Arbal the Undefeated things for reasons. We have to put him somewhere, let's put him down there. And they're going to be swooping up from the south, doing all manner of horror. And that, in some respects, is a method of helping control these humans for the old ones, the Slan, because they can say, we have a place for you to go. This devastated land on the other side of the world.
It's a bit of a fix-me-up, but, it'll get there. So the thing that's quite fascinating to think about with that is imagining being these people in, like, the Southlands who have actually probably by this point been dealing with the actual Lizardmen a fair bit, the Southlands tribes, but they also lived close to the Lizardmen of the Southlands, so they might already kind of have that relationship. It's just grown. But like the people of End and stuff, imagining you're saved by this species that shows up, they've saved you, and they say, okay, you have to go to this new land now.
You're gods.
Yeah,
I would argue that you could, in the same way that we've got the elven gods and the dwarven gods coming up, it could be the literal 1,000 gods of Ind, are transporting them to a new place where they can hopefully put down roots and survive. It's just
heartbreaking. I intentionally want it to be, but I love the idea of the heartbreak of some people being like, this is my home, I can't leave.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's just this merciless Saurus just, boom, you're dead.
Then why not do both? Have those who have been led off towards the better place, and then those who refuse, and the Saurus going, nope, it's extermination or out, and they're coming in afterwards. You're either going or you're not.
Yeah. And love that because you have the forces of chaos. Because the Lizardmen would show up to help fight chaos in those places because those humans are important. They need to be kept alive. So we have humanity is now rerouted to the old world, but these are strange new armies that fight very differently, but they have the support of the Lizardmen. The Lizardmen are now in the old world as well, here to help with this big stage of the war, because this is the big stage.
Yeah, so very loosely, and in the interest of ensuring that we don't run too over in time, humanity of the Warhammer world is siphoned over to all of the old world as and where they're needed. So we have them from the Southlands in the south all the way up to Norska. That entire place is being repopulated, redefended, and what appeared to be something that was falling no longer has quite the same feel as it did before. But we have some real issues here as well, because we have one big unanswered question, Nagash et al., and exactly where they're going to fit into this, because they are not a part of the Great Plan. And dealing with Nagash is a core component of Mazdamundi winning his preferred outcome. But we also have Chaos, who are rampaging across Skaven, many of whom have converted to one side or others of which have just fallen into communities that are terrified. We still have the Chaos Dwarves undealt with over on the other side as well. And Greenskins by this point will be rampaging everywhere, which means in many respects down in the Southlands it's quite likely that the humanity that comes over will be reinforcing Lizardman cities and the existing cities of humanity that are there. It's going to be an interesting mess.
Yep, and now we have all of our options just down to 4, so we no longer have to do double polls anymore.
Wow.
Do you have Mazdamundi speak to the ogres / halflings? Do you have us exterminate undead?
Whatever halflings remain.
Yeah, halflings. Which means dealing with Nagash and the Tomb Kings and the vampires.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have us exterminate chaos? So dealing with what chaos forces are around and active, or do you exterminate the greenskins and try and get the greenskin problem under control?
It's a big mess, isn't it?
Yeah, because while the dwarfs are now going to be in a better position, because for those in the World's Edge Mountains, they'll be very sorrowful and lots of sad new entries in many books of remembrances. But with the Skaven problem very, very effectively dealt with, now the dwarves can turn their full wrath upon the greenskins, who they do hate above all else. So you are keeping the dwarves focused on a mutual enemy, so that's good. That's not bad. But please vote, please vote. We're getting close to the end of the story here, so make sure to keep those votes up. Make sure your opinion's going, because y'all are making things happen. And this is proving to be all sorts of interesting. Donovan, honestly, this. Oh no, we already did that, and that is literally what we ended up doing, hilariously. Scion, that was kind of what I was asking. The forces of order still win as Farkul still dies, but Magnus was killed in the process. Okay, yeah. That's definitely something we discussed.
Yep.
Red Salamander, what if the parents of the Glotkins succeeded in their plan to change the culture of Norska, if not totally, at least in part? Ooh, I'd have to reread the Glotkin story. It's been a long time since I've done that.
Plus, Norska is a huge place, so you'd need a really good story to make that work. I will say,
that is one of the best things about the new map, is Norska got some such fucking cool additions. The fact that Norska now includes the people north of the Sea of Chaos, along that shoreline of the Chaos Waste, those are officially Norscan people now, makes Norska so much bigger. Like, they have so many more people, which is really cool. Donoman, I just imagine Arkham besieging Middenheim, then turning around to see the end war elephants, like a weird version of Theoden in the Moonkill. So
yeah,
good.
that'd be pretty freaking cool.
So good. He hears the horns and he's like, who the hell?
Particularly if we've got, tiger men and possibly elephant people. Not just elephants, but elephant people. Who knows what you're going to get from there? Like Ganesh style end folk popping in from the south. That'd be awesome.
That's a super fun idea. Like, they're charging alongside the Lizardmen. The people of Middenheim are like, whose side are those guys on? Are they on our side, or are they part of Team Chaos? What's happening? Captain Magma, what about good beastmen like the Tiger of End of the Monkey King's domain?
They're going to be part of, I think, this. I don't know. I mean, I think they're probably part of the old one's plan, and they're the ones who are probably staying with all of humanity moved out.
Yeah, that is actually probably a good way to look at it. Yeah, I would agree. I think the Slum would say, you are meant for this place. These lands were meant for you. You must stay. but the humans must go.
Yeah, that seems to be likely.
Hoplite, old ones create Saurus. They destroy Saurus. Old ones create man. Man destroys old ones. Man creates Saurus. Saurus eat man. Gnomes inherit the earth. Ah, yes, as all things are intended. Captain Magma, undead would be very scary with all those dead Skaven. Yeah, y'all have made an interesting world for the Lord of Undeath.
It's also worth noting, though, that when you take a look at how undeath works, at least in the earlier forms of the Warhammer world, it seems to be a very human magic. All of the undead Skaven might not actually be very compatible with their necromancy because they are so unalike of the core spells and the core skeletons that they generally summon. So you might not think it might not be quite as beneficial for them as you might first think.
Yeah, true. It does tend to very much be. It's very, very rare to see a non-human species be more advanced than like a zombie, because the necromantic, the corpse geometries seem to struggle with non-human corpses a bit. Lord Chris, how much of a mess would Kraken Rock Blinger? Did they already get started? Oh, don't worry, Kraken Rock's about, but y'all haven't decided
we haven't dealt with chaos yet.
Yeah. Sarmelian Bloodweavers, sailors flee the old world to end in Cathay and then got ported right back.
Shame.
Oh, we're home. All right, that's it for that time on the vote. Interesting. I did not think y'all were going to go this way. So chat says Mazdamundi should wrap it up and talk to the ogres.
Okay, interesting. So we now need to deal with the ogres, right? So I'm going to say that this might not turn out as well as everyone would expect.
Yeah.
He's been doing pretty well. In terms of his overall plan, and our Frog Chorus has been orchestrating events from across the world and doing broadly very well, attempting to rebuild the great plan from the mess that Chaos is attempting to bring in their great 13th ever chosen. And the ogres, the great plan for the ogres and the halflings was always obscure. It was never certain. It was always unknown to most, indeed. The fact that the halflings were involved with it was unknown to not just most, it's barely known at all. And clearly Mazdamundi didn't know this part. And the plan needs them, because without them, the ogres are never coming to heal. Ever.
Yep.
The law, the ogres, nope. They just aren't.
Yeah, the halflings, their population is going to be pretty decimated by this point.
Absolutely ruined.
Yeah.
It's too late to get what was potentially the route for the great plan through to the ogres, which was the halflings. And those two being two sides of the same coin. That particular part is removed, which means that you are just dealing with the maw-crazed ogres. And they ain't going to fall down into a nice, happy place that you can easily manipulate. It's going to be lunchtime.
Can we save scum? Can we go back? I want to change my choices.
No.
Nope. Yeah. So I would
you done made your choices.
I would say because of the series of decisions we decided, the chat voted to go along. We're just going to blame y'all. The ogres, I genuinely think, could not be salvaged at this point.
Yeah,
because
I think the great plan has hit its first major flaw. The ogres are required. They are deeply anti-chaos, but they are also quite capable of working with chaos and not devolving, as we've discussed in multiple previous streams. And the great mess of combat then, what is the central ogre areas between the greenskins, between chaos, between Cathay, is just going to be that. It's going to be a massive mess, and a mess that, looking from the outside, it doesn't appear that the threads of fate, as they can see it, can in any way resolve it. There's not an easy, I can just go there, tweak that, and bring the ogres under heel. Quite the opposite appears to be the case. If anything, they're just going wild. And that means, sadly, possibly our ogres are bad guys.
I would say, to make matters worse, by this point, Fire Mountain would have absolutely erupted. And when Fire Mountain erupts, the ogres go to war. They are marching west, and they are killing and eating everything in their way.
So they're going to be a massive problem for Cathay, for the Greenskins too.
Yeah, the only upside is that they're going to be slamming into Greenskins, Chaos Dwarfs, or Nagrin's going to have a big problem. And Grand Cathay. Now, Cathay is in a pretty okay way to handle this. Granted, the Great Bastion by this point is going to be grotesquely under attack. Maybe parts of it have broken, and under a lot of pressure. And having attacks coming out from the Western Mountains is not going to help. But at least the Skaven aren't going to be as big of an issue at this point. That being said, I think Mazdamundi, I do not think would ultimately choose to deal with the ogres directly, of letting them slam into the Greenskins and slam into Zarnagrand and let they flounder.
I'm going to suggest that his way of dealing with the ogres is not what you would think. There's no great diplomatic push. There's no great desire to try and control or trammel or in any way maneuver them. Instead, they are gone, which means that there's only one thing he can do now, which is save and preserve. So his job is now going to be, in terms of how do I deal with the ogres, preserving enough of them who are hopefully not tainted so that, you know, the plan can stay in place, which means we'll probably be looking at a community of ogres drawn from not the maw-facing ones, about maybe 300 or 400 of them being gathered together and basically put in place by the lizardmen somewhere relatively safe in their own little pocket dimension. Because that's what lizardmen do.
Yeah, luckily, finding several hundred ogres outside of the Great Mountains is not easy. Horribly difficult. Yeah,
it's easy. There's going to be communities in Nippon and in Ind and Koresh. There's going to be communities over in Lustria, obviously in the Old World also, down the Southlands. They're everywhere. But that then leads to the next major question when we're dealing with the ogres, and that is, how does Mazdamundi deal with a god?
Yep. So
physical fuck off god. And I think the answer to that is up to you rather than us.
Yep. So I am putting a poll in chat right now of, do y'all think, I mean, think about Mazdamundi's position that he's in. Chaos is growing in a lot of strength. The Greenskins are causing a lot of turmoil and preventing a lot of the Eastern and Western forces from meeting each other, but at least they're kind of holding off the ogres for now. He has, and time is very much on a razor's edge now. Like, Middenheim at this point is either destroyed utterly by mixture of spells and stuff, but Archaon's plan to destroy the world the way he wants to do it is not off the table.
Yep, agreed.
And Archaon's getting close. So, but the Great Maw is also very, very emphatically not part of the Great Plan.
Yep.
So does Mazdamundi stick to the plan and try to destroy the Great Maw, a god that is taken on a physical manifestation, which would also allow him to, in tandem, potentially deal with the vortex in the ocean? Or does he ignore it and focus on chaos?
Okay, so more chaos. Your choices.
So that is your choice. So does he destroy the Maw, yes or no? Or try to destroy the Maw, I should say. Vote now. This one is already seeing a pretty interesting split. So if you haven't yet, please go vote. Please go vote. Here's a fun question: could he destroy it without destroying the world? I don't know.
The answer is find out by saying destroy.
Yeah, find out. If you're like, oh no, he's going to destroy the world, then you better say no. If you're saying
no, yes, your choice.
If you're saying no, he can handle it, then you can say yes. Decisions.
While we're waiting there, I'm just going to quickly pull up Juniper's question. Yes, Juniper, yes.
Yeah, ogres have a very, very little sexual dimorphism.
They've got a pretty egalitarian society, contrary to what many would expect.
Let's see. Dynaman, off topic, an idea for a conversation between a Norse and someone from the far north Chaos Waste. The Chaos Waste warrior complains about it just being cold. The Norse can ask, how can you be too cold? You're further south. And he says, not too cold, just cold. Where I'm from, it's never just one temperature. It's hot, cold, everything in between, and it just being cold is weird.
Dynaman, I like that, but there's one major issue. These are people from a society who don't understand that it should be cold in the north. It just is what it is in the north, and in the north it's proper broken. But they don't think that there should be a polar cap north and south because that is not their norm. Further, they don't have mass education in the way that we do. So loosely, I don't think they would have quite the difficulty there that you might initially suspect.
Chat, make sure you go vote. I'd really like to be at 150 votes for this. So if you haven't, grab your phone or take a moment from playing your game or whatever it is you're up to and vote real quick.
Super appreciated. Thank you.
Let's start, Chris. Mazdamundi, I'm going to toss another rock at the ogres. What could possibly go wrong?
It'll be fine.
Mazdamundi's like, we have to deal with the ogres. Celestial Dragon Emperor's like, hey, I know a trick. That totally doesn't make things worse. Donovan, could the Salon try and massively amplify the call of the Maw, which would draw the ogres to their original homeland of the Maw itself? Unfortunately, yeah, that's an interesting idea. Could the Salon manipulate the Maw, which would be, I would say, probably not.
Yeah, the Maw is pretty freaking. It's wow.
There's actually a perfect example of this. There's a story where the Salon failed to control a thunder lizard psychically because it's too animalistic and it's too pent up because it's fighting a Leviathan. I would say this would be a similar situation. It's so animalistic and so massive, they wouldn't be able to properly manipulate it.
Yeah, our frog chorus has definitely hit a hard place here.
The ogres are real cocky for someone in moon laser range.
That's not to assume it wasn't a one-off.
Yeah, that could have been a one-use only.
Yeah, totally.
Rexio Gaming, in Itz's vault, there's a device that's heavily implied to be a time machine. The Salon have no idea what it is, but can we use it to save scum?
Nice try, Rexio.
Yeah, very, very clever use of tools there, but unfortunately we don't have the time for that today.
You know, in a different stream where we still had maybe an hour left, I might have gone, yes, let's do that, but nope.
Okay, so this one's kind of interesting. Twitch heavily disagreed with YouTube.
Oh, interesting.
So if I were to combine y'all percentage-wise, the winning answer would be no, he would not try to fight the Great Maw. But if I did it where I just took the amount of people specifically that voted on Twitch and just added them to the numbers, it wouldn't be enough to change it. So it would be a yes. So the question is, should we do it based on percentage or should we do it based on just pure people?
So, looking at the overall story that we're building, clearly the ultimate bad guy at the end is Chaos. So, whichever way we deal with this is going to be pretty much us heading towards the end. So, if we say he deals with the Maw first, we're probably going Maw, then heading towards Chaos as the end. But if we say Chaos is next, we're heading towards the end right now.
How about a coin flip?
Yeah, coin flip's always fun.
Yeah, because I'll say Twitch, y'all pushed it close up to 50-50 that I'll do a coin flip.
Yeah, quite like that.
All right, so let's say which one should be Maw, do you think, Andy? Heads or tails?
Maw sounds like tails. Something's coming out the other end. No, it should be heads because that's where it all goes in, isn't it?
Okay, fair.
Heads should be the Maw.
All right, so heads is the Maw, tails is straight to Chaos. All right, so I'm going to flip and catch. Ooh, I caught that midair. Slam it on my hand, and it is tails. Mazdamundi, he ignores the Maw.
Ooh,
and goes straight for Chaos.
Okay, so Mazdamundi, I'm going to rationalize this. Mazdamundi has determined that the Maw is a part of the Great Plan. In that when the Great Plan is finished, the Maw should be there. And that is, I think, fascinating, but also speaks to what we made as an earlier decision, in that the effects of the dragons in Cathay were part of the plan, which means that what they pulled down is part of the plan. The Maw and what has happened to the ogres is part of the plan. They have preserved some of the original ogres and presumably some of the original halflings for the inevitable horror, but what the Maw turns the ogres into is part of the plan. And that is an enormous force that can hold off the greenskins, can hold off Chaos, can threaten, obviously, Cathay also, but we have ourselves something that's clearly a part of the great delaying action. Which is, now that all of this is in place, we're heading towards Endgame. And Endgame is to do something that the previous batch of Slan failed to do. What they did was they put the Chaos Gates into a holding pattern. They held it in place. And they lost an enormous number doing so. Now, Mazdamundi is in the position of, we're going to close them. That is our plan. We're going to close them. We're not going to deal with the Chaos troops because that will just be a fight. That will be a fight for the ages that will last not just decades, but potentially centuries, trying to eradicate them from the world. They did that in the Cataclysm. They have to do something else, which means that they have to close the gates. And we have, I would argue, a position where we've got tools to do so, but it's dangerous. Really, really dangerous. Throw the portals into the vault.
just throw the gates into the vault. Problem solved.
Solved. Okay, and I would argue that this is the only obvious way for them to do it, given the setup you've created. And that is, we have a relatively strong Ulthuan. We have relatively strong Dwarven core. We have a very weak humanity, but then humanity is the source of most of the problems anyway, because they're the ones that fall to chaos most. So having a weak humanity is not necessarily a bad idea. We have ourselves greenskins all over the place. We're letting rampage because we're not dealing with them, because they are largely holding chaos at bay and stopping them from taking everything else down. So with all of that in mind, with the Skaven now largely destroyed, and with the core of the geomantic web in place, with the Slann sitting on all of their temples around the world in preparation, we bring down the vortex. We make Malekith's plan happen. We flood the world with magic, letting chaos think that it might finally win. And with that massive onrush of magic, the Slann, enormously empowered, try to close the gates. That's their plan. But if it works or not is up to you.
Yes. And I will also say that because of the way y'all chose to do things, even if they did close the gate, there's another force that could take advantage of this large influx of magic, who may or may not be lurking in the background. But we're on to chaos now.
This should be interesting. The question is really, really simple. And the question is, do the Slans close the gates with their great ritual, or do they not? And this is entirely within their capability, because we have decided that this is the plan that they have been building up towards for the last however many thousand years. This has always been their plan, and their plan is to close the gates. But equally, on the other side, they very easily could fail. Now, obviously, even if they succeed, it's going to be costly. Most of them might die in this particular process. But do they do it? Do they not? It is entirely up to you to decide. And yeah, we haven't dealt with Nagash.
Yeah, don't worry, guys. I haven't forgotten about the undead. Like I said,
we have not dealt with a lot of things.
This is a choose your own adventure book, and y'all finally got to the point where you go, wait, where's the undead option? And the book says, too late.
We are at a very interesting point, and it's heading towards a conclusion that I think should be really quite fun. Let's see where you end up on.
Yep.
I'm quite enjoying this.
Also, I want to say thank you all so much for watching. I think we've broken a new record for Wednesday streams, over 600 fucking people. This is wild for how stupid this is, and we really appreciate it. This is very fun.
Yeah, it's been a really fun one. Thanks all for turning up, and thanks all for giving us your ideas. This is not the story I would have told. Or is it? Or is it?
Yeah, we'll find out Andy's story at the end. That's the thing. So don't leave when we get to the end of y'all's story, because we get to hear Andy's story next.
It's a relatively short one. I don't want to go into loads of detail because it takes too long. But yeah, I did do this before.
Czar94, I'll throw you a bone and say that the fishmen faced off the Slann when Mazdamundi pulled Chipiola from the depths, and it did not go well for the fishmen.
No.
It did not go well for them. Would probably be the most realistic scenario there.
So if you're sitting out there saying, I haven't voted yet, maybe this is the one. This is the one. Go do your vote now. This is the one. Do they close the Chaos Gates? Our big what if. Does Mazdamundi close the gates?
Yeah, if we could get at least 200 of y'all to vote, I would be very happy.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool.
This is the only one. This is the only one I'll ask for 200. I'm begging you, because it's interestingly close.
Is it? Ooh. I'm purposely not looking at the votes.
Yeah. So we're at 130. Come on, just a little more. Come on, just pick up your phone. Just do a little vote, just for me. Just a little vote for me. Just a little kiss on that vote. But yeah, this has been a very, very good time. I think it's pretty I'd love a part 2 covering other paths. Nah, we have to wander to other what ifs at that point. I think the fun of this will be trying to keep them to a single stream, to not go too in depth on it, because then it just kind of turns into a whole other thing.
Yeah,
but
totally.
there are a lot of really fun things we'll be able to explore as well. And
this
if
could
you're
have
like,
gone in so many different ways.
if you're like, but I want more, I want to hear more. Hey, write it. Let us know how it goes. Write your own version and like put it on our Discords and stuff. We'd love to see it. Ricky Chapman, it's a dead body, probably won't rot and burst. Oh, what are we talking about for it's a dead body? We're talking about the maw, or I'm not sure what this is in reference
I
to.
lost track there, Ricky, so apologies. If you're still there, drop another comment in. I'll watch out for it while Sotek's going through the other super chats.
Yeah, we are at 160 votes. Come on, just a few more, folks. Less than 50. Come on, just pick up your phone and vote. Pick up your phone and vote. Even if you're like, well, it's kind of decided. Just get your vote in there. I just want to see 200 people's opinion. Y'all can do it. I believe in you. I believe in you. You're talking about the maw. Yeah. So funny enough, I genuinely feel that if y'all picked kill the maw, like deal with the maw that particular time, I think the result would have been the world blows up, to be honest. Because the maw is kind of a bitch to deal with. Especially if you don't have the ogres on side. I think there could have been a way to deal with it if we had the halflings in enough numbers, but losing the halflings, I think, made the maw that is something you deal with much later.
How many votes we got in now?
We're almost 100. We're almost 170. So I guess I'll call it
170. Pretty good. So what's the vote suggesting?
So oh god, the longer it runs, the closer it gets, though. Like
maybe we've got it for just an extra 30 seconds.
Yeah. I'll give you until the Twitch vote is done, and the Twitch vote I think has about another minute ish. That's an interesting one. What if Tzeentch had not been shattered in the myth that of the creation of magic? Might the nature of magic be different? Yeah, some really fun ones there. The maw exploding like a whale corpse. That would be the most horrific way to destroy a planet I could possibly think of.
Ricky. Just... Yuck.
And so the planet ended with a wet fart. Yeah.
All right. What's our vote say?
All right. Bam. There we go. 170. So at 58%, and this is supported by Twitch, who was at 63%. Yes, the gates are closed.
Right. So I have some potentially.
Here comes consequences that y'all did not expect. Here we go.
Chaos has gone. The gates are closed. Magic comes to an end. Undeath comes to an end. Nagash is fucked.
Yep.
Utterly fucked. The magic that has been sustaining him, flooding the world, goes. Across the world, the Slan collapse. Almost all of them die, either because of the ritual or because of what they're doing. Magic users across the world die. Normal people die because they have been sustained by Gyron their entire lives and they didn't realize they were effectively sterile, mutated creatures that have been kept alive by the magic. And it's gone. They die. Billions across the world die, leaving small pockets of civilization here and there. And this is the great plan. And then the few surviving Slan, using the ancient engines of the world, dismantle it and prepare it for the realms and send it off. Age of Sigmar's coming, baby, because that's what the plan is. It's what the old one's plan always was, but this one actually dismantles the world in a relatively safe way.
Confusing the virus bomb that accidentally leaks out and kills anyone anyway, instead of it just blowing up spectacularly. Yeah.
But
now,
interestingly, we don't have Nagash as a god in this version.
Yeah, there are significant impacts from what y'all did. Like the incarnates will not form the same way in the Sigmarverse. Nagash is killed for realsies. Chaos will be much weaker in AOS because they don't have Archaon. Archaon is killed.
Fucking gods with the elves, though. They continue to survive because elves are bullshit. The dwarves are perfectly preserved with their ancestor gods in place. God, the elves and the dwarves really landed this one.
Yeah, there would have
our
been
humanity in terms of the surviving sets. We have things like Ind and Koresh and various Nippon and Cathay as our next world version. So as we move into Age of Sigmar, we won't have any Empire influence. It'll be completely different cultural backgrounds.
Yeah, instead of Sigmar as your great god of order, it would probably be the Celestial Dragon Emperor as your great god of order.
I think that would be the case. Celestial Dragon will become the great god of order. I think that's pretty freaking cool.
Yep. Mazdamundi, I'd say, would probably have a reasonable chance to survive. I mean, the Geomantic Web would give the Slann enough to do the last things they need to do, because it is able to function just off the energy the world itself produces.
We'll keep them. They'll use the last of its power to break up the world.
Yeah, and no,
which is pretty cool.
For those asking, the fascinating thing here is that for the dragons, they would actually not be in a terrible position because the dragons were here before the portals.
Yes, they were, and they will be existing off of the older magics. And so the older dragons will be surviving just fine. And those who are dragon-blooded, for example, they'll be holding enough of their own power to be fine. And they are, in terms of the greater sense of purity, as in not influenced by chaos, pretty pure as entities. So they'll be doing fine too.
Yeah, interestingly, because of the way y'all close the gates, I think the potential fascinating final battle, the final epic confrontation you'd likely see, greenskins would still be a problem. Funny enough.
Oh, yeah.
They'd be a huge problem.
Still. They'll be everywhere. And the ogres are going to be bad. The maw is going to be sitting in the very center of whatever moves on to.
Yep. They're also, I think. And interestingly, the dragon ogres would be the last true big threat because they also predate that magic.
Yes, they do.
Krakenrock the Black would be awake. And about that would probably one of the last great epics of that age would be the dragon ogres, who also would likely escape into Age of Sigmar, but be one of the predominant chaos forces instead of a side force.
Yeah, I would suggest that the last battles would be the great assault of chaos on the Lizardman cities and their desperate attempt to stop their rituals. We would have a massive epic conflict across the world as from south and north they pretty much converge in the Lizardman cities, but they are stymied in their roots. That ritual
would have taken
days. And there's greenskins stopping them, there's ogres stopping them, there's just the big mess of the world that is in the way as the focus. 100%.
The Age of Shenyang sounds pretty sick. I'm not gonna lie.
The Age of Shenyang would be pretty freaking cool.
Does that mean we can use our AOS models in fantasy?
100%.
Yes, in our setting, absolutely.
Damn straight.
Would remaking worlds
that's a pretty cool end.
Oh, don't worry, chaos always returns. It's a cancer. It'll always find its way back.
Yeah, chaos hasn't gone. Chaos has just been shut off in this particular version for a while as the realms separate, and then the realms of the various winds will begin to form. They were already in place after all. The great spheres of magic that exist will still exist, and the great realms that the elves were attempting to create will also exist. There's going to be all manner of crap out
things
there.
would be different, but yet the same.
But ultimately, they would fall back into a very similar model. The equivalent of the realm gates would eventually start tearing through all the fragmented parts of reality as magic begins to shuffle its way back through all of those systems. The old gods rise, and we end up in the Age of Shenyang, which I think is just beautiful.
Yeah, but there'd be huge changes. For instance, in AOS, instead of all the elven gods being dead at the start, they'd still be alive.
All be alive,
totally. So that would be cool. Wildly different. The ancestor gods, Valea would still be with them. Yep. So she might be able to so things might be different with Grimnir might not die right at the start because he doesn't have the horrible shame of what happened that we still don't know exactly what happened yet in AOS. Age of Dragons, first edition, hitting store shelves this fall. This was fun. The Skaven would come back. Yep. Horned Rat would definitely have gobbled up enough of his children to repopulate them in the realms to come. Because think about trying to exterminate rats on a multiversal scale. You can't get all of them. And only a couple have to get away for them to become a problem.
The Skaven absolutely would survive. We already in this particular story had the horned rat bolt off with all of his core demons and the surviving core individuals that he wanted to keep.
Ah, yeah, that's a great point, Rat. What, the Lady of the Lake would still be alive, so there might be Bretonnian influence.
Regardless of which version of the lady, definitely.
Yeah, regardless of which version you go with, Glory to the Celestial Empire.
Straight.
I'm sure the Celestial Dragon Emperor totally won't be a problematic individual at all. Cough.
Yeah, just as bad as Sigmar, in fact, possibly much worse.
Possibly worse, yeah. Given the Cathayan theme for the AOS setting, the realms long united must divide. Oh, go the Three Kingdoms route? Oh, that'd be a fun storyline. Yeah. But anyway, that brings us to the end.
I love that.
This was really fun. I wasn't 100% sure how it was going to go, but I felt really good about it. But this was a blast. I hope you all had fun.
This was super awesome. I'd first like to say, before I do give my quick summary of how my version of this happened in roleplay.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking forward to that.
Before I do that, I'm just going to give a quick thanks to absolutely everybody that turned up. You made this work. I had very loose ideas of where this might go.
Just like Games Workshop.
Funny.
We did talk about Morgar. To be fair.
We did a little bit. So funny. So I'd like to say first, thanks to everyone. You made this happen, and you chose the path that we went down, and ultimately how it all turned out. If it hadn't been for your choices, we wouldn't have narrated the various outcomes that we did. Some of it, I think, surprised both of us in terms of where it landed. A couple of times, Sotek said something. I was like, "Oh yeah, great idea." And I said something. Sotek went, "Oh no, actually, let's do that." And we ended up in quite a different place to, I think, where either of us expected. Now, this might come as a bit of a surprise, but the end that we had in my version that I played out, I'm not going to go into all the details because it was much like some of my games, a bit mental. But in this one, the elven gods were core. What are the elven gods? The gods had spread themselves throughout all of the species of the old world. Not just the elves, as they had manifested, because they were the gods of the old world. They were not just the gods of the elves. It's just that the elves were there at the beginning with them, and they were chosen children. And one of the gods worked with Mazdamundi to bring about, effectively, what we did today. Now, it all fell out in a slightly different fashion, but the lizard men and connecting them all up, using the geomantic web, the clearing of the lizard men's vision so that they all work together and the slan all work together, and effectively they returned to the old plan. There was an awful lot more talk about discovering the old plaques and discovering the plan and what it was originally, and ultimately the gods who had spoken to the old ones were the ones that took them to those old plaques to effectively persuade the lizardmen that their way was the right way. And their mortal manifestations led the Slan effectively to their next step, which was accepting that gods were a natural evolution for all species, including their own, where the Slan as a whole eventually accepted that Sotek was not just a god of, the plebs. It was their god too. And that they were, Sotek was a manifestation of their might. And somewhat like Jormungandr effectively showing the end of the world, Sotek did the same. And the destruction of the world came at the hands of the lizardmen as they enacted the old one's plan. And the gods separated all the people and pulled them out elsewhere. So that may sound nasty, but they moved off that planet because it was corrupted. They didn't do the Age of Sigmar thing. This was before Age of Sigmar. They moved to Vedra. And they hiked it over to a nearby planet and teleported them all out there.
Using the rest of the setting? What?
Yeah, quite. And that version of the old one's plan had them effectively populate Vedra, where there was already a whole host of lizardmen out there doing lizardmen things. But they had been abandoned by the old ones, much like everybody else had, and had no slan at all. And that became a core conflict of the next step, which was lizardmen versus the rest of the world who just invaded. It was a very silly game.
So my one question would be, which was the elf god that reached out to Mazdamundi?
Of all gods, it was Loic.
Oh, that's unexpected. I would not have put him in the top 5. That's very cool.
It was Loic who danced in.
a lot of sense.
Yeah, totally. And Loek and Mazdamundi became, and this may sound ridiculous, but you had to be there. They became consorts, but not in any not in any realistic way. But effectively, they were twin rulers, ruling over everything. And that was a proper daft.
Any of you that are 40K fans, Andy basically just said that he shipped Mazdamundi and Shigareth.
Yeah, good old Kegarath. Yes. That version of Loic was Kegarath from 40k.
Oh, well, there you go.
And this isn't the game that we were talking about with 40k and Warhammer mixed in. Completely different thing. Because I've played a lot of Warhammer in my time. Much of it was stupid.
Getting Elden Ring vibes.
Yeah, well, hey, I predated the Elden Ring by, in this case, some 25 years. I did this a long time ago.
Andy seeing Mikla being like, they stole my Loic!
Oh, you have no idea. When I saw the End Times come out, and I was like, holy shit balls. They did it like what I did with a completely different game, but worse in every single regard. I'm so upset.
Honestly, I cannot think of anything more fucking terrifying than Mazdamundi riding it on Zlak, and fucking Loic is up there with him and just being like, oh, okay, I guess we just lose.
Loic in the form of a female human.
Yeah, okay, we just lose then.
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Fucking Loic is probably in my top 3 of Elven gods I would not want to go up against. Loic is a fucking nightmare.
Yeah, quite. So that was super fun. This Sunday we will be diving into Arbal the Undefeated, the chosen of Khorne himself. That is going to be an absolute ball. So that's this Sunday at 4 p.m. UK time. And next Wednesday we'll be doing something else. We'll discuss that between ourselves and tell you all a little bit later. I don't think we've decided that one yet, have we?
No, I don't. We don't know what we're doing next Wednesday.
Okay, so we'll do something next Wednesday, but I will like to say that this was super fun.
Yeah, I have a feeling what we might do, but we'll discuss it off stream.
Yeah, sounds good. Discuss it off stream.
Yeah, last couple super chats here. Kornshima, how much would it cost for you guys to write the end time fanfic? Like, I don't know, give us like $50,000.
Yeah, it's going to cost a freaking lot. I'm busy, man.
Yeah, it would take a really long time.
And also, Kareen, if I was doing that, it wouldn't look like this. This was an interesting set of sequences that we go through, but it was very much focused upon the Lizardmen. If we were giving each of the various factions their proper due and looking at everything that they could do and being fair to them, there would be an awful lot more story, but also the Lizardmen should not be so clear. Part of the story of the Lizardmen is that the Slann quite simply can't effectively act the way they should do. They are perfect creatures who are stymied by chaos. And chaos are clouding their vision at every single turn. It is a perpetual, ongoing war. And it might just look like a bunch of toads sitting there going, or some equivalent. But it's proper war. Because if they could be unleashed in the way we did, would win. I don't think you did the wrong thing here. I think that they've had all the time to organize it. They would reach the point where they could win. Now, it might not be in such a short time as we did here. It might be 1,000 years from now instead. But they almost certainly would, because the Slann are bonkers. But yes, if we were doing an End Times one, it would be a far more all-encompassing version.
Yeah, what I think this stream was super duper fun to demonstrate, and hopefully y'all had fun hearing about, was that when the Slann are genuinely untethered and you look at the examples, genuine examples in the lore of what they're capable of, they are bonkers. They are some of the most over-the-top bullshit that Games Workshop has ever came up with. And their only weakness is that GW deliberately does not use them a lot. And when they do remember them, they're like, oh yeah, they're asleep. Moving on.
Let's not focus too much, because if we do, it's going to be silly. That all said, if you enjoyed the stream as much as I did, and I hope you did, do jump over into our Discords and tell us what you'd like from other what ifs, because I think this is pretty much guaranteed that we're definitely going to do at least another 1 or 2 or 3 of these in the future. Don't expect them next week or the week after. We'll just do them every once in a while, as and when we fancy. But I do think this was super fun. And if we are doing more, which I presume we will, we'll be looking for big, interesting questions to answer. But not necessarily always. is. I mean, there might be one week where we don't have a great deal of time, so we could do a small what if. Something's a little bit more tighter or close, or maybe even have ourselves a stream where we do 4 what ifs in a row, each one of them relatively tight and short. You know, a relatively short little what if, because say, for example, what if Karl Franz marries Emmanuel? That's a short personal story that we could probably tell between yourselves out there and us on this side within about half an hour to an hour, in comparison to, say, for example, what if Mazdamundi tried to destroy the entire frickin' world, because that's what he deemed the plan was. That's a very, very, very different affair that takes a lot more chatting about. But yes, do drop your ideas in. I'll open up a thread, or if someone else opens up a thread over in Lorebeards chat over on our side, do go and dive in on the LAWhammer side, and I presume there'll be something similar sitting over in Sotek's side. The more ideas we get, the better. Yep.
And with that, we are done for today. So thank you all for joining us. This is we actually did surprisingly good on time compared to some of our other Wednesday streams.
That was pretty good.
So, please do take care of yourselves. We'll see you hopefully on Sunday for Arbal and Andy's channel. Just to be 100% clear on that.
We're over on the LAWhammer channels for Arbal.
Also, LAWhammer is back this week.
It better be bloody back on Friday, or I will cry. Just to look over, because I actually have my sheets open here. I have, for this thing that we're doing, 30 sheets that I'm printing out of stuff, because I've had so much time to create shit for them to play with this Friday. I've got 30 sheets worth of cards that are going to get printed and cut out for them for this Friday. It's going to be a pretty big one.
All right, just like, I just want to play the game.
I just want to play. Why does Nurgle keep bringing us down? God damn it.
Yep. And then Rookery is not back this
No, we're not doing that. We just had a discussion about that earlier on today. We're going to be starting next week. So not this Saturday, the Saturday after. We're going to be starting with James Wallace, who was the developer of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay First Edition. He was the runner of Hogshead Publishing. We're going to be talking about a big new thing that he's doing, which is going to be super fun.
Okay, great. So nothing this Saturday then. And then, Lorebeards on Sunday. And I'll be around doing other things.
Because you always are. I mean, this Saturday I might do a quick Q&A, because people keep asking me questions.
People do love I love the Q&A. I tune into Andy Q&As.
I might do a Q&A, because I literally have had a bunch of rule questions over in Discord.
To be fair, you hadn't done one in a good... while, so they've been building up.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, we might do one of those as well. So be aware, that might come on Saturday, so do watch out for it. Is that us going?
Yep. We'll see you guys later.
Right.
Take care.
See ya.
Bye-bye.